I'll call the meeting to order and have the clerk call roll.
Bartlett.
Aye. Here. Sorry.
Hirsch. Here. Kittleson.
Here.
Swadley.
Here.
Boersma.
Here.
Johnson. Here. Lawrence.
Here.
Majewski.
Here.
Engelberger.
Here.
Jensen.
Here.
Truel.
Here.
O'Connor.
Here.
There are all 12 alders present.
Thank you. Are there any communications from our alderpersons this evening? Alderperson Boersma.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. I just wanted to let the council know tonight that I will be abstaining from a number of public works votes because I was not able to fully engage in the meeting on the 21st. So just if you're concerned about why I'm abstaining, I wasn't able to fully engage, so I am going to be abstaining from most of the votes with the exception of the last one, which is number 20. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further communications? I'd like to take a moment to thank and congratulate our Public Works Department, Director Brett Hebert, and our Tree Commission. We've been named again for the 23rd year in a row Tree City USA, and for the 20th year in a row receiving a Growth Award from the DNR. So congratulations and thank you to all those folks. With no further communications, the first under presentations is a redevelopment authority update, as was kind of was requested at our last meeting. Good evening, Gary.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. It's a pleasure to be back here tonight. There is a PowerPoint that I think, Matt, you're going to be controlling for me.
Oh,
Here's Derek.
I'll try.
Oh.
Can you help me
Here's
get
the
to
cue.
this? So his, I think he wants his.
Last time I gave an update to the council on the redevelopment efforts was back in August of 2016, and that was just before we released the request for development proposals. So I came here to tell you that we were about to do that. And now that those proposals are, the RFP is out and proposals are back in, I can give you an update on where things stand. So you can go to the next slide. So just as a reminder, we're talking about the riverfront redevelopment area, which is just a small part of the overall redevelopment area. There's another map later on that shows the extent of the entire area, but it does go to the north along the rail corridor to the other part of the Yahara River. And what we've got on the site are, starting from the left side of the screen, Public Works on the very left along 4th Street. The Carpet Warehouse is the diagonal structure along South Street. The Highway Trailer Building is indicated there. To the right of that is Stoughton Trailers. And then coming around the horn there is Elvinstead. And then the big part of the site is the former Millfab property. So just to get everybody oriented, the colors indicate ownership status. So the red is property that the city owns. The darker blue are other significant properties, and then the other is the rest of it is in other private hands. You can go to the next slide. So here's a brief history of the city's efforts in this area, and it pretty much began, as far as I know, in 2004, when both the Gorman Company and the Alexander Company submitted proposals to the city asking for TIF to rehab the Highway Trailer Building. And at that point, it was owned by Stoughton Trailers, and Stoughton Trailers was negotiating with both of those companies. And in order to make the project work, both of the developers needed TIF. And so they both put a request for TIF assistance into the city. It was rejected by the city council. It was the TIF amount was too high at that point. But that started a series of events that made the city council interested in what's the future of this area. And so in 2005, we started doing some initial planning for redevelopment. And I've got some more slides after this that gets into some of the key milestones in this history. And that was a fairly basic plan to identify, well, what kinds of changes do we think we might like to see in this area? And so we identified land uses, and we started thinking about different kinds of projects and that kind of thing. One of the recommendations out of that plan was to form an RDA. In 2006, the city got a grant to look at preparing a bike plan and what kind of improvements might be needed along the river in this redevelopment area. And then in 2007, the Redevelopment Authority was formed. And that was, as you know, it's formed by the City Council. And it was established to lead the efforts to implement redevelopment of the area. Now, at that point, once the Redevelopment Authority is formed, they didn't have an official plan. The state statutes require that in order to take action, that a redevelopment plan needs to be prepared and approved by both the RDA and the City Council. So the RDA established the district, the redevelopment district, and then in 2008, a redevelopment plan was approved. It pretty much followed the same objectives as the initial plan, and it established the authority for the RDA to implement redevelopment within that area, according to the plan. Following the adoption of the redevelopment plan, TID number 5 was created to serve as a financing vehicle for the improvements that were being talked about. And then later in 2009, a neighborhood plan was prepared. And this was a document that put quite a bit more specificity to the initial redevelopment plan, including a preferred conceptual development plan for the riverfront redevelopment area. And we'll get to that in a few minutes. Then in 2010, Moving Out started looking at doing a project in this riverfront redevelopment area, and they initially investigated the highway trailer building. At that point, they thought, boy, this is going to be tough. But their final decision about that building related more to the fact that MillFab was still operating right behind it, and they decided to change their project from the highway trailer building to the vacant Stoughton trailer site where they ended up building. In 2010, the city received a grant to look at the idea of, what if there was a possibility for a business incubator in the city. They found that there probably potentially could be a role for a business incubator, and but it didn't focus on a specific building or structure. In 2010, and again as a spin-off of Moving Out's interest in the highway trailer building, the city acquired the highway trailer building with an agreement with Stoughton Trailers. And that agreement actually allowed the city to take possession of the property, but the city doesn't have to actually pay for it until there's development in that redevelopment area, or in the riverfront redevelopment area. Elvenstead was completed in 2011. In 2013, an architect representing some potential developers investigated the highway trailer building. They were really excited about the prospects of doing something with it. They put together some cost estimates, but they weren't able to get anything to happen after that. Let's see. In 2013, the city received a CDBG housing grant to help with the rehab of housing, not only in the redevelopment area, but throughout the city, but the redevelopment area was targeted in the grant application. In 2014, a National Brownfield Renewal Award was received by the city for the Elvenstead project. MillFab files for bankruptcy in 2014. The Arts District was formed that year. And we went through the offer to purchase on MillFab in 15. And finally in 16, we were able to close at the end of the year on the MillFab property. And then in September of 2016, we issued a request for development proposals. We were looking for a master developer for that riverfront redevelop, for the city-owned portions of the riverfront redevelopment area. And then in 2017, just last month actually, the master developer was selected and moving out was selected for Elvenstead Phase 2. And we'll get caught up on all that in a little bit. There's 2 points out of this that I want to make, and that is redevelopment of old contaminated industrial property is very complex and takes a long time. And that's why when the state legislature, many decades ago, when they created the law that authorized the formation of RDAs, they said that the 7-person body should be comprised of people with development experience, and they'll have 5-year terms. So you get, with an RDA, yes, they are an unelected body, but the reason for that is because they're implementing the public policies that are set by the city council. And so the emphasis is on development expertise and longer terms than is the case with an elected body. Next slide.
Next slide. Oh, sorry.
So this is the initial redevelopment plan that recommended the formation of the RDA. You can see that there's very little specificity here. It's basically saying, I think the brown is that should be residential. I can't really read the slides from here, but it doesn't matter anyway. This is the general, very general land use map from the 2005 redevelopment plan. Next slide. And you can see here the plan objectives for that one was establish an RDA, establish a tax increment financing district, establish home improvement program, establish public-private partnerships, understand environmental issues, replace the heavy industrial uses with residential, commercial, and public spaces, develop the river frontage, and use the river corridor and the rail corridor to connect to the existing trail network north of downtown. So we've done pretty well with those objectives. I mean, you could see that we checked off most of them. Next slide. And then the pedestrian, river crossing, and bike trail options. Again, you can see the plan recommendations there. This is the primary thing is building a bridge, a pedestrian bridge across the Yahara River to connect Mant Park to the redevelopment area. Next slide. In 2007, the city received a build grant and solicited interest in an art space, artist loft concept. The highway trailer building was the focus for this effort. The build grant paid for a market study, but not a feasibility study of the feasibility of rehabbing the building. That study found that there was demand for 22 live workspaces and 7 studio rentals. The majority of those interested were from outside of Stoughton, and they're willing to pay under $600 a month. A third of the artists indicated a maximum rent of under $600 a month, which is pretty tough, but a third indicated rents of $600 to $1,000 a month.
But that was in 2007, though.
That was in 2007.
Right.
Correct. Even then, it was tough. And then when the study was done, ArtSpace said, okay, to go to the next level of doing the feasibility study, it's going to cost $750,000. And the city council said, no, thank you, at that point, justifiably. Next slide. And then in 2008, that 2005 redevelopment plan was updated. The RDA had been formed by this time, and so this plan would become the plan that's required by state statutes to guide the redevelopment authority's efforts. And it documented blight and authorized the RDA to use its powers to promote redevelopment. Next slide. And then in 2009, the RDA was continuing to do more work, and we received more grant funding to do this more specific planning. And this process involved quite a bit of public engagement. We held 2 public workshops, had some great turnout. It resulted in 2 different concept plans for the rail corridor. And then out of those 2 plans came a preferred development plan. There were a number of sustainable development options included in the plan, and it also included design guidelines that potentially could control building height, building placement, and streetscaping. Next plan, or next slide, sorry. Same plan. This is a blow-up of the riverfront redevelopment area. There's one thing in particular I want to point out here is that you see there's no highway trailer building on there. And that's because throughout all of the public hearings and workshops that were held, not only on this 2009 plan, but going all the way back to the 2005 plan, there was very little interest, if any, expressed in saving the highway trailer building. Most of the comments actually in regards to the highway trailer building were in the framework of talking about it as blight and needing to come down, and people, especially the neighbors, wanting to have that whole area cleaned up. But this plan was adopted by the City Council and as a preferred development plan, and this is the plan that went out in the request for developer proposals seeking a master developer for this area. Next slide. And these are just some images from that plan of the types of development that it was anticipating. Next slide. Next slide. And then TID 5 was created. So it's got a 27-year life. So if you do the math, which in 2010, add 27 to that is 2037. And we have a 22-year expenditure period, so until 2032. So we still have a little bit of life in the TID, but we are 7 years into it already, and needing to get some increment created because the city's been incurring expenses and interest charges are racking up. So we're getting to the point where it's time to start creating a little more increment than we already have. The TIF project plan projected $68 million in new increment and $17 million of expenditures. But that applies to the whole TIF district for its whole life. And right now we're just focusing on the riverfront redevelopment area, the very southern part of that TIF district. Next slide. In 2010, Alvinstead was constructed. You could see the vacant site that they built on and then what it looks like afterwards. It was a contaminated site, just like the rest of the riverfront redevelopment area is. Poor soils, high water table. The RDA acquired the property, secured municipal liability exemption, and then sold it to the developer for the price they paid for it. The RDA secured, Alvinstead also got some TIF money out of this as well. The RDA secured a $200,000 grant to address environmental issues. The city provided $580,000 in TIF to address site issues, and as I mentioned earlier, it won a National Brownfield Award for social impact. Next slide. And then that brings us up to the development proposals. So in 2016, we prepared a request for proposals for a master developer for city-owned property. The request was based on the council's official 2009 Rail Corridor Neighborhood Plan. It was sent to 144 developers across southern Wisconsin and northern Illinois. We received 3 proposals. Only one proposal was actually responsive to the RFP, and that was Tennessee out of Chicago. They recently completed a project in Appleton. And they applied to be the master developer for all the city-owned land. Moving Out submitted a proposal, but they proposed acquiring the Stoughton Trailers property along 8th Street so that they can continue the next phase of Alvinstead along 8th. And then Gorman came in and proposed only a rehab of the highway trailer building. They did not propose to be a master developer, but they were interested in taking another shot at the highway trailer building. Next slide. So the RDA selected Tennessee to be the master developer. And some of their reasons for doing so was their experience with a very similar project in Appleton. Their development ideas were consistent with the 2009 concept plan. They proposed opening a view of the river from Rotary Park. So being able to stand at Rotary Park and having almost a boulevard and a clear sight line down to some riverfront amenity that would be along the river. They were suggesting about $40 million in new property value in increment. This developer considers the highway trailer building a liability. And in fact, they say that if the highway trailer building stays, we're probably going to have to find another master developer for the property. They're willing to start construction this fall or early spring, depending on how the approval or permitting process goes and the development of the final master plan for the property. Moving out was selected for the Stoughton trailer site. The RDA really liked the idea of continuing that project along 8th Street and cleaning up the 8th Street side of this area. The city had a positive experience with Elvinstead. They would continue the similar development along 8th Street. They're proposing 50 units that would be valued somewhere between $1.5 to $2 million in property value. And because they need to get their grants and funding lined up, they will not be able to start construction until the fall of 2018, so fall of next year. Next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Matt,
So
you're going to
engrossing.
get fired. You're not a good slide turner.
But I was in charge of it.
All right.
And then the Gorman proposal for the highway trailer building was rejected by the RDA for a number of reasons. Moving Out and Gorman were in direct competition for similar funding sources and their market and tenants as well. We tried to get Moving Out and Gorman to agree to work together to bundle this so that it would be one single project to avoid competition. That didn't work out. The master developer views the highway trailer building as a liability, and they would need to wait to start the master development until the rehabbed highway trailer building is leased. And so we're talking about potentially a 3-year delay. The highway trailer building blocks the view of the river from Rotary Park, and they've indicated that if the highway trailer building is part of this, stays as part of the project, that we would probably need to find another master developer. And the Gorman project relies on tax credits. They weren't asking for TIF. They said we could do this without TIF, but they do rely on the historic preservation and low-income housing tax credits. And currently there are political threats to both programs with significant changes likely. And so the RDA viewed that as a risk in selecting them. Then the tax credits get changed, the project is no longer viable, and then we've lost a year. And the anticipated property values are significantly less with the highway trailer building in place than those that would be created by a master developer without the highway trailer building on the site. Next slide. And here are the numbers. I know those numbers are way too small, and I don't intend that. I mean, you can read them if you like and are able, but the important numbers are at the bottom. So I ran 2 TIF revenue scenarios, with one scenario being Tennessee with a moving out project but no highway trailer building. And assuming that the timing of the development is as indicated by the developers and the values as indicated by the developers,
Gary, maybe I'll ask a question,
Yep.
as those numbers are up there. Because Tennessee also extends it to 8th Street, does your calculation with Gorman extend it to 8th Street as well, or did you not include that in your calculation?
no, the area was the same for both the scenarios.
Okay.
Yep, what happened there?
got a message that it was almost out of power,
Uh-oh.
and then he plugged it in and it turned off.
Oh, no. Well, we don't need the, I can say the numbers. We're pretty much through the presentation. But so that scenario with no highway trailer building and Tennessee and moving out, being the two developers for the property, the total development value under that scenario is a little over $41 million. And that will generate a total of about $14 million in TIF revenue over the remaining life of the TIF. Keeping the highway trailer building, and assuming Gorman is still interested in doing something with it, and then a master developer for the rest of the site, results in, first of all, the highway trailer building coming online after 2 years with $2.8 million of increment. And then there's a year delay, and then the master developer starts building their project, a building at a time, and that goes on for 7 years. 7 years of building year after year. Now that's an fairly aggressive assumption on my part, but those assumptions are the same for both of these scenarios. And under that scenario, only almost $35 million of increment is created and about $10 million of revenue compared to almost $14 million of revenue without the highway trailer building there. And the reason for that, the primary reason for that is, number one, there's essentially a 2-year shift in extending out when the revenue would start coming in. But there's also about $6.5 million less increment generated because of the fact that the highway trailer building receives low-income housing tax credits, and the value is significantly depressed compared to the market rate units that the master developer would bring online. So, so that's the major difference, is the timing and the lower value of the proposed development on Gorman. So that's the increment analysis. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was that we have a design charrette planned. It's planned for April 30th through May 3rd, and it is contingent. This design charrette is totally contingent on the outcome of the demolition moratorium from the last council meeting. As I said, the master developer views the highway trailer building as a liability, and if the purpose of the design charrette is to talk about how to use the highway trailer building, he's not interested, and will not participate under those conditions. So if the demolition moratorium stays in place, then our design charrette gets pushed out until that issue is resolved. The design charrette is intended to involve decision makers, so the City Council, the RDA, Plan Commission, and other city decision makers, stakeholders, the public, and the developer. And the way this works is that the developer's design team would be in town for those days, and they'll be set up in a place that people can come in, or we'll have time scheduled for different interest groups and stakeholders to come in to talk about the project. And the whole idea here is to generate ideas for the master plan around different topics that relate to it, like the riverfront, relationship to nearby community spaces, the views into the site, the density, what kind of corridors there should be, what the nodes are like, and how the edges are defined. And in addition to other aspects of character around the site, like architectural styles and materials. And then, I made a mistake. That wasn't the last thing. This is the last thing, and that's the demolition. Our current plans, assuming no demolition moratorium, is that MilFab will likely be coming down in the May-June timeframe. At its next RDA meeting, the RDA will be reviewing a bid package for demolition services. And assuming they approve that, that'll be issued, put out on the street right away, and then at the next RDA meeting, we should have some bids in to review and approve. And then, so then we're expecting demolition to occur in that May-June timeframe. As far as the highway trailer building is concerned, demolition is not imminent on that. We need to line up some grant funding. Assuming we have a master developer in hand, the grants are tied to having a developer. So we'd apply for grants in the April-May timeframe. I think that funding could get secured by the fall, and then a demolition bid package will need to be prepared for that building. And that'll be fall of 2017 with demolition probably in the spring of 2018. So that's about what I have for an update. I'd be happy to take any questions or if anybody has any.
Alderperson Hirsch.
Sure. Gary, also, I think a couple of things. One, when approached, Gorman also, if I remember right, said that they would consider being a master developer too when you approached them, and they actually gave us a plan. And the RDA kind of went with Tennessee. So there is a possibility that Gorman actually could be a master developer as well. And I guess that's all that right now, because I had something else and it just flitted away, but it'll come back. So, but is that, so that's still a possibility. If Tennessee doesn't want to do it, Gorman still can step in.
Yeah, Gorman doesn't have a lot of experience being with a master developer, so I think it would come back to the RDA for discussion about whether Gorman is the right developer to be the master developer for the whole site. But again, that'll be a decision that's up to the RDA.
Thank you. Alderperson Majewski.
I'm kind of curious as to why we split this parcel into two pieces when we were painstakingly trying to create a large block for a full development. We looked at in a whole, and RDA effectively basically took it and said, we're going to take this slice off of it and give it to somebody, and now we're going to start looking at the rest of it. That's how I'm hearing this.
I don't think so. I'm hearing just the opposite, actually. I'm hearing that the RDA has been assembling parcels so that they can create that big master development, and they've selected a developer to take on all of that property.
No, you didn't, because you have already given a portion of that to Phase 2.
No,
Elvinstead.
that
Am I
wasn't,
misunderstanding
I'm sorry,
this?
that
Yep,
property
yep, you're
was not.
misunderstanding just a little bit. If you could explain the difference between the Elvinstead property proposal
Sure.
and what the RDA mill fab highway trailer building, that area is.
Yeah, the highway trailer building, mill fab, and the public works buildings are all property that the city owns and controls. The city does not control the the Stoughton trailer building. Elvinstead negotiated with the owners of that property and another property on their own before they submitted their proposal. And so they're basically saying, we've got this development idea. If you guys are interested, we'd like to move it forward. So
I understand.
they did it in the context of the master development proposal, and it came in at the same time with the other proposals, but it's really not.
It's a standalone project.
It's a standalone project.
So it shouldn't be included with this per se.
Well, except that part of their request was asking the RDA to do the same thing they did on the first phase of Elvinstead, which is acquire the property, secure the municipal liability exemption for environmental issues, and then sell it back to them for development. So that's their proposal for the property. So they are asking for a city acquisition similar to first phase of Elvinstead.
Thank you. Alderperson Hirsch, it must have flitted back in.
Right, it did. As soon as I said it didn't. Two things. Yes, I think this is what Alderperson Majewski is talking about. The original plan was that it was going to go from 4th to 8th Street. And now, because Stoughton Trailers, we were never going to allow that building to be part of it, because that would again, be a liability that would not look great. Second, I just want to make sure that everybody's clear that Elmstead is asking for TIF money, and that they also have to apply for the same public assistance money as Gorman. So if the federal government or the state takes away these grant possibilities, that project also may be affected. So it's not.
true. I'm sorry.
They're not?
No, because Elmstead would not be relying on the 40% historic preservation tax credits.
But there's
The
still the
low-income
WIDA grant.
low-income housing tax credits are 9%.
Okay.
So it's a huge difference between those two different tax credit sources. Elmstead has the capability of, if they don't get their low-income housing tax credits, they can find other sources to supplement that. Gorman, it relies on that historic preservation tax credit. And so if, as the state is talking about, either cutting it or reducing it, their portion significantly, which is 20%, the federal portion of that is 20%. And at both levels, state and federal, there's discussion about cutting those back. And already, we're seeing changes, and I don't know, Joe, if you're following the price of historic tax credits, but it's less than a one-to-one. I mean, you pay less for the credits than what they're worth right now, because there's people are starting to leave the market already, even just from talk of changes that will be made.
Thank you.
So the RDA sees that as a threat anyway, as a risk for moving forward with that.
Thank you. Alderperson Truul and then Engelberger.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Gary, just as a clarification, the RFP that did go out called for development between 4th and 7th, correct? And what actually happened was when that development came back, it was moving out that was asking us about the possibility of extending to take the development and carry it over to 8th, correct?
That's right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Alderperson Engelberger.
Thank you, Your Honor. I got a few questions. There was I believe there was a study done or authorized for $10,000 regarding historical significance of the highway trailer building and the powerhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Is that study available someplace?
Yeah, it should be on the city's website.
Is it on the website? I couldn't
I
find it.
don't know. What's the name of the study, Gary? We can certainly
It's
check it out.
a report that Gail Klein,
I'm sorry?
that Gail Klein prepared. So it's a determination of eligibility.
Okay.
If somebody can tell me where that is, I'd like to
Yep.
see it.
We'll
Also,
find it, yep.
is there, are these proposals from these 3 developers online also?
I
On
don't
our
think the
website?
proposals are, but I assume they'd be available for. if you
I
want.
mean, I would like to see them.
Might be.
You know, I can hear you describing them, but, you know, I'd like to take a look at them to see exactly what they've got in their proposals. I guess another question I have is with regard to moving out and Elmstead. What kind of TIF generation did that do for the city?
Well, both projects are not very big TIF generators.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Elmstead is existing for the last 5, 6 years.
Right.
I'm just wondering what kind of TIF generation there is there.
I think the value on that is a little under $1 million right now.
Okay.
So it was about a $7 million investment, and it came on the tax rolls it's on the tax rolls at about $1 million.
And how many units are there at Elmstead? 40?
I don't remember off the top
In
of my
that
head.
neighborhood,
It's-
40,
I think
48?
it's around 40 or
somewhere
something
in
like
there?
that, yeah. Peter, do you remember? No, I can't.
And then my question is, you know, we're looking at prime real estate downtown on the river, and from what I can see, there's proposed another 50 units of subsidized housing with Moving Out's project. And, I mean, that's a lot of subsidized housing in one consolidated area of the city. Was there any studies done regarding this, regarding if that's feasible or not?
Well, the Moving Out has their own market studies for their market. And they, from their perspective, they've got a tremendous waiting list for Elvinstead right now. And so they are confident that they can do the same thing with a second phase of 50 units and open full. Well, they're pretty confident about that.
So is Elvinstead totally subsidized? Is there any market rate in that project?
I think they have some market rate, but it's mostly subsidized housing.
What about in the proposed
In the-
50-unit building, or 50 units?
The same thing. There will be some market rate, but mostly subsidized.
You know, we haven't really discussed this regarding effects of affordable housing, and, I mean, I've asked to try to get this talked about here probably the last 6 months or so. We haven't had the discussion on it. You know, there hasn't been a lot of development in the last, you know, up until the last year or two, you know, for the last 8-10 years. And so there probably wasn't really a need to discuss our policies on subsidized housing. We've got a lot of development in process and coming up, and I think that's an area that we need to really talk about. And, I mean, I would really like to know those answers before we authorize a whole bunch of subsidized housing in a prime real estate spot in our downtown.
Well, here's the deal, I guess. Your TIF is, you need to start creating increment.
I understand that.
And you've got developers teed up. We've got everything teed up here to go. And to take actions like putting a demolition moratorium on and to ask for more studies, we're going to lose what we've got, and then we'll have to start over again. So
I understand where you're coming from.
But
As far as
it jeopardizes the TIF, and it's going to delay, and we'll probably have to find new developers when
I
when it's
understand
ready to go again.
your presentation. With regard to the moratorium, my understanding is that affects the highway trailer building and not anything else on that site.
Well, it affects the master developer. And so the development moratorium, or the demolition moratorium
Doesn't stop
goes
any
into
demolition
place.
from happening in
Okay,
June,
we've got
like
a
you talked about.
couple more questions, if I may, Alderman Engelberger. Alderperson Swadley and Alderperson Majewski.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. I've got a few questions. I guess my first question is, quite honestly, I don't have a complete understanding of what the RDA's authorities are and how they relate to the city council's responsibilities. For example, and actually got a little bit confused when I was reading the Hub, because in one article it said that the action the RDA took was to demolish the highway trailer building, and the other article said that the action they took was to recommend to the council that the council have that building demolished. So at this point, I'm still a little bit confused about what was actually decided at that meeting. And so I guess I'm looking for an explanation of what the authority of the RDA is as far as how it relates to making those decisions.
I'm perfectly willing and able to answer that question, but you have your city attorney. I don't know, Matt, I don't
Whoever
want to put you on the
wants to-
spot, but I'm certainly willing to do it.
I'd rather have you tackle it, just because I haven't been as close to the process as you have. I'm not
Okay.
sure what action the RDA took, so.
Yeah, and I can't speak to the legality of the specific action that they took, but in general, the relationship between the RDA and the city council is that the city council sets development policy and the RDA implements. And so the RDA also is a planning arm, and they are responsible for developing plans, presenting them to the council for approval and adoption. And then it goes back to the RDA to implement those plans. So so there is the 2008 redevelopment plan authorized the RDA, and it was, the city council authorized the RDA to exercise its broad spectrum of powers under state statutes, which are pretty broad. The RDA has powers that are almost equivalent to a city council in the ability to acquire property, demolish buildings, enter property with an inspection warrant, and those kinds of things. So, and even condemnation. The RDA has the power to condemn property, which this RDA has never exercised. So in general, that's the relationship.
Okay, thank you. So what's made it a little bit difficult is it's hard to keep up to date on what's going on. You referenced the redevelopment plan from 2008, 2009. Many of the members of the council weren't on the council back then. A lot has changed, out in the development world since then, which to me begs the question, should that plan have been or should it be updated? I was up in Green Bay this weekend, and I've seen what they've done to some of the older buildings along the river downtown in Green Bay, and it's pretty amazing. It's pretty impressive, and the businesses there are all thriving because they were able to repurpose those buildings into other things, and people are coming to those buildings for their activities. So I'm thinking in my mind that that plan may be outdated. I know there was some forums where other plans were presented. Turnouts were good at those forums. People were really excited about, and I think still are excited about, the redevelopment opportunities down on the MillFab site. And what's making it difficult to follow is, for me anyway, is when I go back and look, on our website, the minutes haven't been updated since September. So even if somebody casually wanted to follow on what's going on with the RDA, the information's not there. The proposals were not on the website. The agenda for the meeting that you took action to accept the RFP and to make the decision to demolish the building, I would say I don't even know if that was adequately, properly noticed on that agenda. There was nothing on there that suggested there was going to be any action taken on the demolition of the highway trailer buildings. And I find that really problematic, and I'm hoping that by communicating now that we can have some positive change going forward and have a better understanding of what you guys are up to, because you guys are putting a lot of time and effort into what you're doing, and I appreciate that. But in return, I need to have these periodic updates or at least minutes, so if a constituent asks me what's going on in our district and what's going on in the city, I can give them an answer. Right now, I can't do that because the information's not there. So
Before you go on, I'd like to, you mentioned that the minutes have not been updated, and we can all apologize for that. Lisa Aid, who has been our staff to the RDA, has also been practically by herself holding up our finance department. So yeah, she's behind, and she's working on getting those caught up. So our apologies on that.
Sure.
She's working hard on it, but not there yet.
Okay.
I'll let you finish. We have Majewski, Boersma, and then O'Connor.
okay. So, but I do have a
And
couple questions.
True.
One question I would have is when you received the proposals, was there any updated information as far as the demographics? I know you alluded to some that were done on the highway trailer building several years ago, and what tenants potentially would be willing to pay and how many kids they would potentially bring with them. I'm wondering if we have that kind of information for this plan, and if we have any information as far as the Elvestead, what we currently have, as far as how many school-aged children would be expected to move into those units, because, our school district have a severe issue with declining enrollment. And if, as a city, if we have an opportunity to help address that issue, I think we should take advantage of that. I don't know whether or not this plan does that, because I don't know enough about that. So that would be one question for you.
And then, so normally when that happens is after the developer submits plans for a project, then it goes to Plan Commission, and those are the kinds of questions that Plan Commission would ask, and the developer would have to respond to that. But that generally doesn't happen at this point in the process.
Well, to me, it's too late. You've already accepted the developer and their plan, and if we don't know what their intentions are and whether it'll be beneficial to our community, why would we accept it just because it says that there's a good payback on the
But these
TIF?
aren't plans, they're just proposals. They're saying, this is what we're proposing to do, and we still need to develop the plans. That's what the design charrette is all about. It's to help prepare the master plan for this area. What is this area going to look like? They have some general ideas about density and the kinds of buildings they build and how much they're worth and how much they're valued. But at this point in the process, we just ask for proposals. We're not expecting everybody who submits a proposal to invest the money it takes to put a master plan together.
Yeah, well, I guess maybe that's the difference between when you're looking at things through an RDA lens and a city council lens, especially when you're looking at Elvinstead. They're already there, we have a proven track record. So if we're going to accept and allow them to expand, which may be the best thing we ever do, I don't know because I don't have the information, we should at least know what we have going on there right now as far as the number of young families, because as a community, we need to get younger. You know, that's been brought out during our comprehensive plan update, and there's been plenty of feedback and data that shows that that's a problem not only for the city but for the school district. And my other question would be, you know, to Chief Leck, would be, you know, do you have any idea how much time and effort we're providing in city services currently at Elvinstead? Because those are the types of information that I'm going to need when we get to the point to make decisions on a plan.
And that could be easily prepared for you. I don't see that's an obstacle in any way.
Well, I would
I mean, having
like
that
to have that information, at least on Elvinstead, before we expand what we already have.
Okay, Council President Swadley, I've got two questions that you've put together, at least two, right?
Yep.
School kids at Elvinstead, and we can figure that out, I'm sorry, by talking to the school district and others, as also how many police calls or incidents have happened, and we can certainly figure that out and get that all to.
Do you have any idea, just off the,
Not off the top of my mind, but not an excessive amount of calls there. But I think you would be better focused to not just law enforcement calls, but all public safety calls, because there would be an influence of, you know, EMS calls, fire calls, things like that, that might also play a bearing on it, so.
and right, and then if we're going to expand it, then the next point would be is based on your experience and other communities' experience, what will another 50 units do? Make it better, worse, or the same as what we already have? And I think at least for the Elvinstead part, those things should have been taken into consideration before we made a commitment to that.
Okay, thank you. I do have, and I have to backtrack a little bit, Alderman Majewski, Alderman Truul, Boersma, and then O'Connor. Alderman Majewski.
Just more out of curiosity, in the beginning of your presentation, you said you had eliminated Gorman you said for a number of different reasons. Could you elaborate on a couple of those? Because I'm kind of curious as to why.
It was in the presentation.
No, it really wasn't. You just said that for a couple of different reasons, and I was just kind of curious as to what they may be.
Moving Out and Gorman are in direct competition for similar funding sources. Moving Out and Gorman are not willing to work together, so we asked them to, could you work together, enter into a partnership with each other so that we can package both sites together, and so you're not competing with one another. They said they don't do that. The master developer views the highway trailer building as a liability, and the Gorman project relies on tax credits and historic preservation and low-income housing tax credits, and the anticipated property values are significantly less than those that would be created by the master developer. So those are the primary reasons.
One more thing that came up after Alderman Swadley was talking. You'd explained to him that.
Tom.
Sorry. You'd explained to Alderman Swadley that these are, right now you're in the process of looking at proposals, and that the design has not yet happened, and you're going to be starting doing that. So my question becomes, the master developer that you've chosen must have something in mind already, because he doesn't want the highway trailer building there, and he has not, I mean, it's pretty
He
emphatic.
doesn't want it there because he's got a new buildings. He doesn't do historic property. So for him to take on, and there's no reason that he would, because the concept plan that the city council approved did not show the highway trailer building be there. So he had the expectation, and rightfully so, that that he had potentially use of the whole site. And so he doesn't do historic buildings. He views that if that building moves forward, that he's putting his development on hold until that one gets rehabbed and filled. And then he can start marketing his property, so he doesn't have the competition for filling those spaces. Even though he's got market rate, and these are mostly subsidized, 50 out of the 59 units are, in the Gorman proposal, were proposed to be subsidized. It's still the competition of trying to lease space and a market that's, for Stoughton's got a decent market, and we're confident that it can absorb all of these, but you're not going to be able to absorb big chunks all at once. So that's the reason they want to do one building at a time. Fill that building and then do the next one.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Alderperson Truul.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just as a frame of reference, the RDA, over the course of most of 2016, talked about a plan of attack, and as Gary has mentioned, talked about identifying possible developers. Remember that the highway trailer building had sat vacant for 7 years, I believe, since we purchased it. As a part of that effort, we went out for a master developer. As Gary said, he actually contacted, I think he said 144 people were on the various lists and things like that. We got one proposal for a master developer, and that was the Tennessee Group. We weren't familiar with them and had a chance to spend some time with the principal. A number of the members went up and took a look at a similar type project up in the Appleton area. Had the opportunity to talk to public officials up there about the developer and what the process was like. And at the end of the day, the RDA decided to go forward with that master developer. If we had just kept the discussion at that point, that would have been consistent with what we went out for. We went out for a master developer for the area bounded by South Street on the north, 4th Street to 7th Street. The Tennessee Group came back with quite frankly, a very intense development. And the RDA had some concerns about it not, in terms of at least the initial concept that he brought in, was fairly dense. And the RDA has had some discussion. It's been communicated to the Tennessee Group about, again, wanting to make sure that we have the strong open corridor, again, tying in the riverfront and the like. And so it was with that in mind that the RDA was moving forward with that. As a part of that discussion, as Gary has mentioned, all the previous plans had indicated that we had shown that the highway trailer building was coming down. At the same time, we did get an opportunity to get a proposal from the Gorman Group and from Moving Out. I believe it was at that point that the RDA was intrigued by that. And so we tried to look to try and see if there was a way to incorporate those other folks into the project in some way or another. And again, the question I asked Gary before as a clarifying statement is, again, we went out and looked at the redevelopment district was from 4th into 7th. Moving Out came back and talked about taking 8th Street, which again, there's a Stoughton Trailers building on the corner of 8th and South Street, 40,000 square foot building, that they felt they could perhaps redevelop and it added to, for me personally, it added to our development. It gave us a whole other block that we could take in as a part of it. Alderman Engelberger talked about the valuable land down on the riverfront. What Tennessee is proposing is predominantly a private development, market rate with commercial and other things, truly taking advantage of that space, that property that we're looking at. And yet at the same time, We've expressed that strong desire, and he's expressed the desire to, again, make sure that it has the sight lines, it has the public venue, it allows for access and a walkway down along the river. It was at either the last council meeting or the council before where we talked about the possibility, where Tom Lynch came in and talked about opportunities across the river and the like. We've made Tennessee aware of some of the other things that may be happening there, and I think there's an excitement there. To Alderman Engelberg's concern about the intensity of subsidized housing, if we choose to, we can. There is the opportunity for us to revisit the whole discussion about moving out on 8th Street. Again, I think from the RDA's perspective, we were looking at the fact that this process gave us an opportunity to take again a larger parcel of land. At the last council meeting, we moved forward with an offer to purchase the carpet warehouse building. Again, we've been trying to look at other opportunities to increase our options down there to get an even better, great development. So again, from a how we got here, from the RDA, again, as Gary walked us through 15 years of history and plans and the like, the RDA reviewed those. We thought that they made sense, and we're still consistent because they were talking about a strong public presence, a riverfront use, a mixed use. We also shared information that we were getting from the comprehensive plan and a lot of the public comments that have been coming in about tying together the riverfront development. And in fact, a lot of the community has come forth and said we can't stop just at the Millfab property. We should look at the rest of the river, jumping across 4th Street and looking at other options. And so again, the RDA was trying to take all those things into consideration. But at the end of the day, I think I'm going to keep coming back to something that Gary said, and that is what's at stake is that we have a master developer that the RDA believes that has experience and can in fact pull off the kind of development that the community's been looking for years. When we first purchased the highway trailer building, we were always saying the 800-pound gorilla was the Millfab property. Fortunately, we've now got control of it. So now we need to take advantage of that and get the best project we possibly can. Our master developer has indicated a willingness to work with us. Again, as a part of the process, we called out last year, we talked about this design charrette and basically the opportunity to really get the community to come in once we picked a master developer to have the community help us shape what we want to see down there. And so that's the focus on the charrette, and that's what Tennessee has agreed to. But again, as a part of that discussion, the RDA and talking with the master developer, the discussion has always been that they would like to have control of the highway trailer building, to take that down, again, to also tie in, as we said, now the possibility of utilizing the old carpet warehouse building, and really create that again, hopefully beautiful sight line from the Rotary Park and down 5th Street as we look down to the river. And so that's what's at risk. Again, the discussion about whether you want to move forward with moving out or not, we can have those discussions separately. It truly is the next block. I think we should take it all at one time. And again, when we go through the design charrette with the master developer, try and find out what the community is looking for. There's a couple other properties there that allow us to do some things. But at the end of the day, that's literally where we are at. It's coming back to a point of we went out, we followed a process, we did something that I would argue that we often don't do as a city council, and that is we kept actually going back and bringing up the past plans and bringing them forward. And we gave all that information to the community at large, or excuse me, to the development community, and said, with all this in mind, please come back with a proposal. We've got one. We've got a firm that we believe can move forward. At this point, they've expressed a strong concern about us taking a different direction with the highway trailer building. And like I said, for me, it's actually been kind of, we've confused the matter a bit, because if we had just stayed on what the RFP was, which was finding a master developer for 4th to 7th Street, we've done that. And that's what we'd like to move forward with.
Thank you. I have Alderperson Boersma, O'Connor, and then Hirsch. Alderperson Boersma and Jensen.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I'm sorry, Gary, would you like to sit right next to Tammy? You could use the microphone there. I know you've recently had hip surgery.
And
and
I
you
know
need
Peter wants to make closing.
Certainly, yep.
I think we have to some extent here is going back to some past stuff that the council and the city is looking at, and that is whether we should have this be city sort of guided or developer guided to some extent. And I think that's the whole purpose of the charrette, is to actually to give the citizens and our city and the council and everybody to have some input into this whole thing, because I think that there is some kickback in terms of having a developer make all the decisions and dictate to us what is going to happen, because I think that the city is so invested in this wonderful piece of property that we're going to be developing, that there should be as much input as possible. Now, that's the first thing, and I appreciate what Scott says about this. I also appreciate what Gary and the RDA has done, and I've been to as many RDA meetings as I possibly can. So I think it's part of that. And then I had one really quick question of Gary, and that is, in a number of the RDA meetings that we talked about whether there's usable, if that building was torn down, whether there's usable items that we can use. And I think one of them was the bricks in the building. And you didn't address that, I don't think, but if you could just talk about that.
Yeah, certainly, when it comes time to prepare the demolition bid package for the highway trailer building, one of the stipulations in that would be recycling the bricks and making them available for the future development. And the master developer has expressed an interest in doing something along those lines, of creating significant features in the site with reusing those bricks, that kind of thing.
And then just one follow-up, and that is that I think there is a general sense of so why would a developer be so against another developer doing something to the highway trailer building? Why are they so against? And I'm not sure that everybody quite understands. Is it mostly the site view, or are there other things? It's a competition with another facility. Why are they so adamant about this? I don't quite understand that.
Well, for the master developer, it's number one, they don't have expertise in preserving historic structures.
But it would be a different developer. It would
Could be a
Gorman.
different developer, yeah. So, we don't have to move forward with this developer. I mean, we could always find another master developer if that's possible. I'm not sure about that. I mean, it may take a while.
Frankly, I wonder if they're bluffing, but I don't know.
Okay, Alderperson O'Connor.
My
Are you
question,
finished?
I'm sorry.
I thought so. Okay, Alderperson
thank you, Mayor.
O'Connor.
My question's been asked and answered several times.
Several times. All right, great. Alderperson Hirsch.
A couple of things. One, I guess, because this is a historic building, and I'm just new to RDA and the council, has Landmarks ever been consulted before you even thought about putting that in the RFP about the historic nature of this building? Maybe in the old railroad corridor project you did, but recently, because people have changed and there's a lot of new people in Stoughton that may have different viewpoints, and we have new landmarks. And the second thing, originally when you proposed the charrettes, no decisions were really going to be made, if I remember right, and I know I talked to you about this not too long ago, that the decision about the highway building was going to be part of the charrette, so you would get community input. Why did that change, and, why was the community left out of that decision?
Number one, I don't recall saying that the highway trailer building would be part of the discussion, but it's possible that I did. It's irrelevant in that once the master developer was selected, they had a pretty firm position about that building. And so they've made it clear that if there's even a hint of the highway trailer building staying in place, they're not participating in a design charrette. And so, that's where we're at right now, is that we have a master developer who wants nothing to do with that. And so to any scenario, practically, that I can see in front of us, of moving forward with the highway trailer building would mean finding a different master developer.
I guess my follow-up to that is that master developer is already showing his hand of how easily he is to work with us, and that puts up a big red flag for me. Because when I went to see him in Appleton, no mention about the highway trailer building being a non-issue. He wanted to work with us, and now all of a sudden he's been selected and he's playing these games. How many more games is he going to be playing throughout this development?
Well, I don't see that as games at all. Remember, from his perspective, he looked at a preferred development plan, a preferred concept plan for the city that didn't have the highway trailer building on it. So he didn't even know that there was a highway trailer building at that point. And, you know, so he submitted a proposal on the basis of assuming he had a blank canvas in front of him. And now he's finding out that, well, that may not be the case. Okay, well, that's fine. I'll go find another place to develop. I think, you know, that's all it is. I don't see him playing games. I think he's just, you know, he's just he's just working in his own self-interest.
Okay, thank you. Alderperson Jensen.
Thank you. Is it possible to bring up slide 1 this time? Can you?
Not from Gary.
Just had to ask.
We lost that one.
You just had to ask. Okay. Gary, first of all, and Peter and everybody, I want to thank the RDA. I think they do a good job. Our communications is the thing that I think that Alderperson Swadley was referring to. That could be better. I'd like to see that improve somehow. You know, maybe a monthly report saying this is what we're doing. This is what our projects are, how our projects are proceeding. I think that would be something that would be good for the council and for the RDA. The one thing I wanted to mention is that the highway trailer building is what everybody's referring to this, and I personally differentiate on that. I've got one here, but nobody else can see it. If you look at that building, the building that is along the sidewalk, that's the highway trailer building. There is a building behind it that dates back to the 1880s. That's the Mant Moline Plow building. That's the one building that, if anything was going to be saved, that's the building I want to be saved. That has so much history to it. And quite frankly, it's a much better looking building than the highway trailer building. It needs an awful lot of work, though. So I do understand where you're coming from, what you're saying about, he thought he had a blank canvas to work with. If there is any way that could be saved, I think it could be a beautiful community center. It could be used for numerous things. It could be used for art shows. It could be used as an incubator for small businesses. It could be used as a year-round farmer's market. All kinds of different things that it could be used for. And if you were able, well, we can't do it, but if we were able to overlay it on that projected plan that you had there, it would be about where the green space is, a little bit north of where the green space is. I don't think that it would be that hard to redesign that and be able to save that portion of it. If he's not willing to work with that, I would be disappointed with that. I would be very disappointed with that, because, I mean, if you look at some of the buildings in England, my God, they have a castle sitting there where all you got is a wall sitting there, and they're saving it. Nobody can touch it. And here we are, we're tearing down buildings that are 150 years old and are so much a part of our history that it really bothers me that we're going to do that. So, I mean, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. And I know that we're really not we're still in a presentation mode, but we're having a great conversation. Alderperson Engelberger.
Thank you, Honor. I'm going to be quick if I can here. I totally agree with Alder Jensen. It's kind of stole my thunder a little bit, but I just want to say a couple things. I was on the RDA in 2012 and 13 when I first came on the council. Scott was a member at that time, not on the council. And, I've been talking since that time about, wanting to preserve buildings, including the highway trailer and the powerhouse and those types of things. I think it'd be great to try to incorporate those into the design of this development. What I was going to say regarding what Greg just said, you know, you talked about having the boulevard effect from Main Street down, or from Rotary Park down. Not that I want to see the highway trailer building gone, but if you did demolition of part of it, I think what Greg is talking about is that wagon building is offset over farther to the east. And I think that would allow you to have that boulevard all the way down, and you still would have the Mant Wagon building. That Mant Wagon building does have a ton of history here within this community, and you know, I would even hope that they would consider a historical type design, even with the new buildings on the site. I think that would be something that would be interesting.
I think that's something they'd like to hear about in the
Yeah.
design charrette.
So I wanted to say that. I wanted to say one more thing about my thoughts on the subsidized housing in the district there. Recently I've talked to, actually some people have talked to me about how low-income housing families are affecting the school district. I think there's a school board member here tonight, and she could maybe verify this, but my understanding is there's one particular school in the east side of Stoughton that has a real problem with differences of scores and grades and that type of thing because of this problem of a low-income area. And, you know, when you're adding to that, that can be even more of a problem. So my thoughts are to try to spread the low-income housing or the subsidized housing out throughout the community rather than in one single area. So you don't have problems like Madison has with an Allied Drive area, places like that. So that's what I wanted to say about that. The other thing I did want to say that I do appreciate everything that the RDA does. You know, like I said, I was on there and I know how hard you guys work on this stuff. And, you know, hopefully communicating back and forth and taking more input and those types of things. And my question was with the design charrettes. Can you maybe, Gary, explain that a little bit more, how that process is going to start and what you're trying to get at with that whole process?
We'd like to start it with a community potluck on a Sunday afternoon. Start with a tour of the site so we can bring people down there and get them familiar with the area. Come back, have a potluck supper, introduce the design team and the folks who they're going to be working with over the next couple of days. And then Monday through Wednesday would be a series of meetings with different stakeholders and people having chances to just come in and see how the work's progressing, having some night sessions where we can have an open house kind of format and talk about how the plan is coming along and show the work that's been done to that point. And then by the end of Wednesday, the designers should have, after taking all the input from people, they should have some sketches of what the master plan is looking like. Then they'll need to go back and pretty it up, you know, because at this point they're just working in sketches, but they'll go back and prepare their master plan and then bring it back to the RDA and then take it to Plan Commission and City Council for approval.
Okay. So just one more comment. You know, if they're starting with just a blank slate, you know, without the highway trailer building, that can have a big effect on input from the community. I think you're going to have people at those meetings that are going to want historic type design incorporated into this thing, you know. So I mean, if the main developer that we picked is so rigid that he's going to say, I'm not dealing with that, you know, maybe we need to take a look at that.
Well, he's not anti-historical.
Well, I mean, you've made it sound that way. You've actually made it sound that way.
It's just that
And, you know,
it's not it's not what he does. It takes a special expertise to be able to do what Gorman does.
I understand
And
that.
Gorman's one of the few developers in the state that can do that.
And I come from construction, and there are ways that developers can hire contractors to do that kind of stuff, and it's very easily done. We've got a landscape or a historical type architect on our landmarks commission that's what he does, you know. So I mean, it can easily be hired and contracted out, as Scott knows.
Thank you. Alderperson Johnson.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm also on the landmarks, and we had some conversations about this, that we would like to have it preserved. And I'm on the east side, and this is in my district, and I know a lot of my constituents are also concerned about the historical aspect of this building. And I do want to thank the RDA committee that on all the hard work that you're doing. Being new on this council, it just seems odd that I'm having issues with the RDA and the Planning Commission, how much power they have, and then we find out after the fact, after decisions are made, about the direction of our city without the council being involved in the first place on certain things. So that's a little bit off the side of things, but thank you for all your work, but I would really like to work with a developer that can seize all aspects of what a historic building can bring to our city. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that'll wrap it up. I know that our RDA president, Peter Sveum, would like to have a couple of words, please.
I'm Peter Sveum. I am chair of the RDA, and now that Gary has answered all the hard questions, I just wanted to give you a little background on our group, so that some of you are new and you may not know who's been working on all this. As Gary mentioned, the RDA was formed in 2007. 5 of our 7 voting members have been on the RDA between 8 and 10 years. Actually, we have 3 members that have been on for the entire 10 years. Gary has over 35 years of experience. To date, we've facilitated the Elvinstead redevelopment. We acquired the highway trailer building. We removed the Marathon gas station eyesore. We created a revolving loan fund for Main Street businesses and business owners and real estate owners. We acquired the Milfab property after probably almost 2 years of negotiating. We're presently working on a purchase of 425 East South Street. You may know it as the Carpet Warehouse, and I think I've been on that for probably 3 or 4 months trying to negotiate with the bank. And I will say, and this isn't a pat on my back, this is really complicated work that we do. It really is complicated. I was certainly fortunate to have Gary as a support along the way. I've been on since 2008, by the way. But I was also very fortunate to have Lori Sullivan as a great resource, and I'm counting on Tammy, to give us the same kind of type of support, because the TIF and the paybacks and the grants, Gary has secured hundreds of thousands of dollars of grants for us, hundreds of thousands of dollars along the way. So this expertise is awesome to have. So I think we have a great group. We have people with banking backgrounds, real estate brokerage, real estate development, construction. We also have a member who's educated in the sciences. So when we have questions about soils and contamination, we have that resource at our fingertips as well. So I think we've got an excellent group. The Milfab property certainly was kind of the trigger for a lot of good things to happen. Most of us were wondering if we ever have that opportunity to control the Milfab site, and it happened sooner than we thought it would. But I want to give you just a quick summary of how we've been working on that. In September of last year, we sent out the request for proposals. Gary had mentioned that. In October, we met with interested developers, and that was an open session meeting, and 4 alders were there. Now, I'm going to give you an idea of these meetings and how many alders were there, and I'm not talking about Regina and Scott. These are other alders that were there as our guests. We had 4 alders at that meeting when we met our developers. In December, we received the redevelopment proposals. And in December, Rodney Shield put those development proposals on the city website. I know they're there. January 11th, RDA meeting, we reviewed the redevelopment proposals, open session, 3 alders there as guests. January 19th, we viewed, 3 of us went up to the Appleton development that was completed by our master developer on the Fox River. Regina and I and Gary went. 2 32-unit buildings, wonderfully done. Each of the buildings had a food and beverage tenant in it to serve those who want to enjoy the riverfront. We also met the Appleton Economic Development Director, who spoke highly of our master developer. Matter of fact, she made a point of telling us that they had amended their development 5 times during the course of their relationship. I think that says a lot about our master developer. Also says a lot about the city of Appleton, frankly. February 8th, RDA meeting. We interviewed 3 developers. Open session. We selected Tansay as the master developer, and there were 2 alders there as guests. We had a special February 20th RDA meeting. Continued to do our due diligence on the remaining 2 proposals, Gorman and moving out. Open session. 5 alders were there. 5 alders were there, plus Scott and Virginia. We had 7. I looked at Lisa and said, "Are we in trouble?" I thought something was happening I didn't know about. So we had 7 alders at that meeting. And the March 8th RDA meeting, we did select moving out as the second developer. They agreed to take down the Stoughton trailer building, or the highway. We also agreed to take down the highway trailer building. Open session, 2 alders in addition to Scott and Regina. So I'm disappointed that there's so much conversation about lack of communication, but I'll get to that more specifically in a minute. As Gary mentioned, the moving out project is around 50 units, a kind of a project that'll complement Elvinstead. I personally saw it as a wonderful way to improve 8th Street. I thought it was really cool that it was outside of our 10-acre campus. It was like a bonus. We finally had a mechanism we could use to remove the Stoughton trailer building on the corner of East South Street and 8th Street. And has been talked about already tonight, Elvinstead. I had talked to the mayor and the chief about this. Elvinstead has been a good community partner for the city of Stoughton. Yes, we did talk about removing the highway trailer building. From some of my personal thoughts, it enables us to maximize the use of that 10 acres, get everything out of the way so we can do the best possible job on that 10-acre parcel. That is paramount to me. We can also maximize the potential tax increment. Gary touched on that. These are market rate units, so the tax increment is going to be greater. Gary mentioned this also. We can enable our master developer to have a clean canvas to work with. I think that's huge. We can create a clear viewscape from East South Street, and also Rotary Park. We always talked about, in all the years I've been at RDA, how wonderful it would be if the river was opened up to East South Street. We've always talked about that. And we've kind of dreamed of an open pedestrian mall walkway from East South Street down to the river trail, and perhaps to food and beverage if the market allows. That's what we've been dreaming about. This isn't new. I was not able to attend the March 14th City Council meeting, but I heard about it, so I watched it on WTSO on my computer. And I started to think that based on the comments made, that we're almost viewed as a out-of-control rogue RDA, like we're running off on our own and trying to do our own thing. Couple things, and I feel very strongly about making this comment tonight. The RDA would never, ever act contrary to state law, ever. We would never do that. And there was a comment made to that effect at that March 14th meeting. We would never do anything contrary to state law. And the RDA will always communicate with the council in whatever fashion you prefer. As I said, we always have alders at our meetings. No one has ever asked for more communication. I see a lot of alders around town. I invite alders to coffee now and then, and I've been declined. I was declined once. But we talk by phone, we have coffee, we talk about the city, and no one's ever expressed anything but the RDA is doing a great job. No one has said, we need to learn more. You got to come to a meeting and tell us what's going on. I see people all the time, and I initiate the conversations because I want the input. And yet here we are tonight talking about the fact we haven't communicated well. We'll communicate as much as you want. Just tell us. There's no secrets. And the idea that we're doing things contrary to the fabric of our community. I'm a 4th generation. I think Greg is too. I mean, there's not many of us around anymore, right? But my point is, we care about the community as much, at least as much, or maybe more than anyone else in this room. That's our job. So we're trying to do the best we can to maximize that site. We're going to have one chance at it, and we want to do the best we can. Several of our RDA members are long-term residents. As I said, I'm a fourth generation. And I throughout this whole process, and I'll close, I've never felt like we weren't on the same page as council. I've never felt that because we have 2 alders on our committee. We always have alders attending as guests, and I talk to alders all the time. I've never felt like we weren't on the same page. And so it hurts me a little bit, and I don't have the crying towel out, but, you know, I try to initiate conversations to talk about what we're doing. So I'm a little bit taken back by the fact that we're being painted as not communicating. I know there's a problem with the minutes. Donna addressed that. But I know they're out. I don't know if they're on the site or not.
Yeah, I don't think they've not been approved by RDA, so they're not ready to go onto the website yet. We'll get it rectified.
Then it might be my fault. Lisa sent it to me, but I guess maybe she didn't tell me I had to respond with.
Well, and Lisa will be the first one to say, we have a 3-person, what do I say, finance department. We were without Lori, and then we were without another staff member, so she's struggling, doing an awesome job. And she'll get it caught up.
She's wonderful. And I know she was sick, and I know that it was tax season, so I'm not complaining. I'm just saying they're out now.
Yep.
So I guess, once again, I never felt like we haven't been on the first page. I hope that you just let us keep doing our work, because I think we have great things in mind and great things planned for that parcel. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
I got one question, Your Honor, if
Sure.
I could. I just, for one, Peter, there's no such thing as too much communication. So, but my question is, either you or Gary, regarding the CDA, where are we at with the CDA, and will that have any effects on this development?
I will answer a little bit, then you can give it more in depth. I don't think, to my knowledge, the CDA isn't anywhere. I'm aware of it, and we've talked about it. And I thought it was going to get done in 2016.
CDA.
That's what Lori had promised. It didn't happen. I don't know where it is at. Mike, I gave up pushing on it.
Just a question, yeah.
I just gave up.
Yep, just curious about it.
Yeah, so I can supplement that a little bit.
Gary,
before you
could
go
you
on-
define what is the CDA?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
What is that?
Yeah, oh boy, here we go.
That's all right.
I'm not sure this is the night to get into the discussion of the CDA now.
Not much, but what does the
in
initial
general-
CDA
Just the
stand
acronym.
for?
Yeah, CDA stands for Community Development Authority.
Thank you.
And
Yep.
that's similar to a redevelopment authority, except that it also includes housing. So all the powers that are vested in the Stoughton Housing Authority would be under the CDA, as well as the RDA. So you would combine the RDA and the Housing Authority to form a community development authority, so that it would have a very broad-based community development direction for the city.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much for coming, Gary and Peter, and updating us on what will be a continued conversation.
Thank you.
With your permission tonight, I'm asking our alderpersons if we could move our city attorney update regarding historic preservation ordinances a little bit. We do have some other, I know that there are folks here for that, but we do have the folks regarding agenda item 8 in old business are here from Canada and other places, so they may appreciate moving it up, as well as agenda item number 5 would like to move to the front of the agenda. I'd like to continue with our public comment period and then move those 2 items up to the front of the agenda, if that's all right. Okay.
Well, just a question, are you not going to have the discussion on a report from the attorney?
Yes, I'd like to do that, but because we have guests here that need to get back, moving out of town this evening, I'd like them to have the chance to address their items, and then we can get back to that address or to that item. So on public comment period, because that is next on our agenda. We do have several folks registered to speak. Our clerk will let you know when you have 30 seconds left. You do have 3 minutes to speak. We'll begin with Roger Springman at 812 Creedeman.
This is a voice you've heard before, and you're going to hear it again tonight. One of the things that you always hear me talk about is process, and I have attended 3 or 4 RDA meetings over the last 6 months, and have been generally excited about the prospects of this becoming a really a landmark regional facility for Stoughton. So whatever I say, don't mistake my goal. It's the same goal as the RDA, but I have some process concerns I want to bring to your attention. When I go to RDA meetings, I come there as a citizen. I don't come there as a councilman or a decision maker, because I'm not. I'm a citizen. So it's important for you to understand what I view as an important part of a decision-making, a citizen's perspective on this process. Number one, it's got to be understandable. When we look at what citizens got to know, we have to know that the process that the RDA is using and you're using is understandable, meaning it's got to be orderly and largely linear. That is, I can follow it, somebody in the audience can follow it, or those watching at home can follow it and understand exactly where you're going and how you're going to get there. That has not been the case with the RDA so far. Secondly, it's got to have ample time for public involvement, ample and timely time for public involvement. That is, where the public gets a chance to weigh in at a critical moment to exercise their points of view, to relay their concerns to that decision-making body. That, again, has not happened with the RDA. The charrette is great, and I love it. Don't get me wrong, I think it's a fantastic thing. But to date, I've been at a lot of those meetings, and Peter and I know each other. He'll call on me on occasion, but the average citizen doesn't have a chance to know that that process is a little bit open to them, but in general, it is not an open process for the public. All the meetings that I've attended and other citizens on occasion, not that many, by the way, it doesn't seem like a timely process for public involvement so far. And finally, it must be transparent. We, the citizens, got to know what's going to happen at a meeting. And at the last meeting I attended, when that decision to strike down, break down, tear down the highway trailer came up, I knew it was on the agenda. I said, where is it on the agenda? Well, it wasn't there. And so, like Alder Swadley said, it's like, I don't get this. Why is this being decided when it's not even on the agenda? So if I'm sitting at home, if that meeting was put on TV that night, I go, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? This wasn't even on the agenda. Why are you doing this tonight? So there's things that make me concerned about the process. The other thing that really makes me concerned is this, that maybe it was a blank slate, and maybe that's how the RDA viewed it, and I think that's fine, going back to old principles and old plans. But here's the thing. Why didn't those developers understand that there's very important history on that site so that they at least could consider it in their decision-making for what they want to propose or what they want to apply for? Because it might have been that there were some other historic architects or developers that may have applied for that site if they knew there were some critical buildings there that could have been worked into their talents and skills. So in general, I'm wondering about that, saying why didn't those developers, the proposers, know that there were buildings there of value to the city of Stoughton and not just ordinary buildings? These are the buildings that made Stoughton Stoughton. This is not a normal historic building in Stoughton. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And next we have Peggy Varigan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Peggy Varigan. I'm the chair of the Landmarks Commission. I just wanted to briefly comment on process. This winter, members of City Council asked the Landmarks Commission to suggest language to address the issue of authorizing demolition in the Main Street zoning overlay district. We did this in February and submitted comments to the Planning Department. We didn't know where things were in the process, but presumed the Planning Department would contact us with questions. March 9th, we were forwarded Attorney Dregny's review dated March 9th. This memo was sent to all of you. After reading his memo, it seems clear that he has numerous comments and questions, and all parties could have benefited from a conversation before the memo was sent to City Council. Had these comments come to Landmarks first, we could have had this conversation and hopefully addressed some of his comments and questions. But since we weren't contacted, now I have to address this memo in front of City Council. Some of his questions we could have helped with include, but not limited to, On page 2 of the comments, city's current ordinances do not regulate property listed in the National Register, but recommended changes would change that. However, current city ordinance do regulate National Register listed properties. It's called the Downtown Zoning Overlay District. That zoning overlay regulates changes within the overlay, and the overlay mirrors the National Register Historic District. Page 3, number 1, given that the recommended language says listed buildings, it likely would apply only to individually listed buildings, not all located in a historic district, but themselves not individually listed. This is a simple clarification of terminology. In the National Register, listed is listed. Buildings that are in the National Register Historic District are listed in the National Register. There are 2 ways to get there, individual listing or district listing, but the end result is the same. Again, listed is listed. There's no differentiation. On page 3, number 2, recommended changes provide no standards to guide the exercise of discretion in deciding whether to approve demolition of a National Register building. The lack of standards exposes ordinance to legal challenge, including the challenge under the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution of the United States. That may be true. However, these standards don't exist now in our current overlay zoning district ordinance. So where is this concerned about challenges under the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution of the United States now? Page 3, number 5, asking about overlapping categories, specifically how to apply review procedures to a building that have been designated under various categories. Number 2, not a designated landmark. Number 3, included in a local historic district.
Request extension.
Except that these buildings
Peggy,
in a
can you
local
tell us
landmark district.
how much longer do you have?
1 minute.
Okay, yep.
Sorry. These buildings in a local landmark district, if a building is located in a local landmark district, it is a local landmark. Again, it's the same result. Listed is listed. You get there 2 different ways, by a district or individually, but the result is the same. City council meetings are not the most efficient forum for drafting the details of these suggested ordinance changes. One solution is that the Landmarks Commission hear directly from the attorney so we can answer these types of questions and develop a final draft. This way, what is then put in front of you has already been ironed out for appropriate language. I should further point out that these comments from March 9th, in response to our suggestions, was sent to a whole list of people, but ironically, it was not sent to the Landmarks Commission. We weren't even on the distribution list for the memo. So as a reminder, the Landmarks Commission is an arm of city government, and we are a part of this process. I'm sure leaving us off the distribution list was an oversight, but we'd like to see a more reasonable and efficient process moving forward. Thank you.
So Peggy, can I ask you to send us your list so that we can be sure that Matt gets them? I know that it doesn't seem like you're aware. Council did ask Attorney Dregney, excuse me, to meet with you and the Landmarks Commission. He needed to put together his thoughts, and he'll make a presentation yet this evening to talk about those things before he sits down with the Landmarks Commission. So we greatly appreciate those comments. If you could get those to us, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next I have Lisa Reeves wishing to speak. Excuse me.
I'm Lisa Reeves. I live at 708 East Main, and forgive me for looking at my phone, but I was just looking up, as I'm trying to learn more about this, the redevelopment website, and what it says in part is the RDA's next step is working with neighborhood residents and business owners to create a neighborhood plan focused on transformation of the southern industrial portion of the district. I'll try to paraphrase a little bit. Define what types of redevelopment projects property owners would like to pursue, and determine desired density, architectural design. End result will allow developers to confidently propose buildings, knowing that key issues will have been resolved within the neighborhoods. And I heard him mention, if I heard correctly, he referenced public forums in 2005 and 2009. That seems to be 12 and 8 years ago. I didn't hear him say anything about anything recent, so I don't really see that as relevant public input. I frankly don't know about the trailer buildings as viable options or any of those historic buildings because I haven't been educated, because I haven't been invited. There hasn't been any public forums, so I don't know enough about it to have an opinion, but I'd like to have an opinion. I think some of my neighbors would. I really felt a sense of urgency when he was talking about, if we don't do something about this soon, the developer's going to walk, we're going to lose the developer. What about citizen input? It's not clear to me, frankly, why a developer who doesn't, in his words, doesn't do historic buildings is in the midst of a redevelopment in a historic city, but that's probably for another day. But, I, for one, am pretty frustrated with developers driving the train. City council are elected officials and are accountable to those who elected them. And I don't believe that decisions like riverfront redevelopment, demolition of historic buildings can be made without council approval and more public input. So I would urge you to, continue asking the questions that you're asking as council members, and that, you think very seriously about the amount of power that some of these commissions have. And, just the need for collaboration. I'd like to talk less about power because I think that sends a bad message, but just making sure that we're collaborating with the public and the council. And I think what Mike said is very true about the school system. I don't think any decisions we make can be made just, in and of themselves. I have met some families who are leaving Stoughton because, frankly, it's Kaganza School, the ones that I've talked with. They're concerned about the number of kids with behavior problems and not about the kids because they have behavior problems, but because they don't have the resources to deal with them. So if you start putting in housing and you start making decisions and you don't think about the impact on the school and the neighborhood, then I think, we have a lot to worry about, and I think we could do better than that. So thank you.
Thank you. And next registered to speak is Christy Panthofer.
Good evening. Christy Panthofer is my name. I live in District 2, and I've been in Stoughton, I think, 30 years now about. I first moved here to Stoughton because it was a historic town. That's what brought me here. We bought a 1903 home, which we restored. It's been designated a local landmark, and we're also in a historic neighborhood, that landmark. I just don't understand why we would even consider getting rid of our historic buildings. It is really what Stoughton's made of. It is what makes us stand out from other communities, other cities. We watch cities all around us becoming generic cookie-cutter cities, and I don't think anybody here wants that for Stoughton. And the other thing about being transparent, I'm like, what? They're taking down this building? And then I just hear there's another building behind it. That would be the same fate for that building too. So it just kind of is mind-boggling. We should just be saving our historic buildings, not tearing them down. Stoughton is and will continue to be a historic and cultural destination. And I understand the developer's point. It's way easier to tear something down and start over from the beginning. And again, what Lisa said, why did we not consider developers that, with this in mind, that we want to preserve our historic buildings in the first place? That should have been part of our vision. And what Mike said too about making it a historic kind of development, working with what we have and building around it. So I guess that's, and Tim saying the development you saw in Green Bay, I've seen that too. Who was that master developer, and why aren't we contacting people like that that's where we should be looking. So those are just some of my ideas, and it's just frustrating to not know what's going on. And then hearing suddenly, in the hub, they're tearing down a building so it is frustrating, and I think the citizens need to be, of this city, need to be informed of what is going on. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I'm going to ask our alders to bear with me while we play a little bit of hopscotch with our agenda. I'd like to address agenda item number 8 under old business.
Is there anybody else that needs to speak?
No, I'm sorry, that was it for public comment. I'm sorry, I'm moving right along, right? I'm sorry. That was all that's registered. Did you wish to speak during our public comment period?
I would, but.
Okay, if you'd like to.
We're in time to sign it.
Oh, that's all right. Come on up and,
Sure?
yep.
Okay.
You just need to know your name and address, please. Thanks, Regina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Allison Sorg. I live at 109 South Madison Street. My family moved here 11 years ago, a little over 11 years ago, and one of the things we really liked about Stoughton was the historic downtown. We live in a historic district, and I know when we would go to Mant Park, we would see the mill fab area and the Mant wagon factory, and we thought that really could be a cool place. And it's something that really draws your eye. We thought somebody could really do something with that someday. So when we saw that it was going up for RDA, we thought that's really going to be impressive. So it was disappointing to hear that the potential was there to tear it down. History is very important to Stoughton, and we've seen that with the 1892 building, the old high school over by the middle school, and the administration building. There's been a lot of community input. People don't want us to tear that down too. So I know that history is important to Stoughton residents, especially those of you that have been here a lot longer than 11 years. There's also an environmental impact in tearing down a building, especially when we are able to creatively reuse something, and we have a developer who is well known for their ability at historic rehabilitation of buildings. It seems a shame to not explore that a little bit more. It is concerning, as others have said, it's a little concerning that Tennessee seems like they're kind of trying to run the show, and I think it's important for us to reassert what is important to our community. When you look at a town like Sun Prairie has done some redevelopment that has used the buildings that are already there, and they are really doing a neat job with their downtown. Madison has done the same. Middleton has done the same. Farther away, I know we've traveled to Paducah, Kentucky, and you can see what they have done with the old train station down there, and it's really impressive, and I think that would be something that would really fit with the character that is our community. As a sitting school board member, I'm also deeply concerned with declining enrollment, and that is an issue for the entire community because it does affect property values if we are unable to keep our school district running and able to provide the programs that we have available for them. Additional housing has helped Sand Hill, the development out on Page Street. So Elvenstead is really a neat community, and it's very attractive to people that see it. But I am concerned with kind of concentrating that housing all in one place. It creates an exclusionary system for people of any socioeconomic status, and I think we need to explore that more carefully and consider having subsidized housing in another area of town. And that's it. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think I have, are there others wishing to speak? No? All right then, now we're going to move on to, I'm sorry, this is old business, agenda item number 8. And Attorney Dregney led us through this at Finance. So we'll, with your indulgence, Alderperson Lawrence, we'll let Matt.
Which one are we doing? I'm sorry.
Number 8.
Number 8, okay.
And this is for those at home, consideration and possible action on the following items relating to the sale of land in Business Park North to Napa.
Okay, thank you,
I
Your Honor.
read for you there, didn't I? Sorry.
What's that?
I said I just read for you.
Yeah, it's all right. I'll do it again. I'm all into redundancy sometimes. Your Honor, I make a motion to approve Resolution 41, R41, 2017, regarding the approval of the indemnification agreement relating to the agricultural conversion fee.
Second.
Thank you. There's a motion by Lawrence, second by Swadley. Alderperson Lawrence?
I'll pass this on to Attorney Dragney.
Thank you. So this item relates to the sale of city-owned land to North American Fur Auctions. As you may recall, the city purchased this land from the Moe family. It was agricultural land a number of years ago for the expansion of the Business Park North. At the time the land was purchased, there was an expectation that there may be or would be an agricultural conversion fee payment that would become due because the land was ag land and it was expected to be converted to industrial land. The city bought the land and as part of the closing had $15,000 placed in escrow to cover that ag conversion fee. The city rezoned the land to industrial, but the actual use of the land did not change. It remained land that the Moe family farmed for a number of years after the closing. Then in the fall of 2015, the agricultural use stopped, and the land at that time was not converted to industrial use. Instead, it would just remain fallow. So as a result, the way the ag conversion fee process works, the city's assessor evaluates the status of the land and then notifies the Dane County Treasurer if there's a conversion from ag to industrial, triggering the fee. Because it wasn't converted to industrial, it was just converted to fallow, no fee was due. We've been in touch with the assessor and the Dane County Treasurer's office, and to the best of our ability, working with them, the conclusion is that that fee will never be triggered. That if the city sells this land to NAFA and they then convert the use to industrial use, because there was this interim period of it being fallow while it was owned by the city, there won't be an ag conversion fee triggered. There's a letter to that effect that we received from the city's assessor that I believe is in your packet, and I believe you have a memorandum from our office that addresses this issue. NAFA has requested that the law in this area is a bit murky. It's been a little bit of a challenge to figure out how to analyze the question, but we believe that that's the right answer. In any event, NAFA has requested that the city indemnify them in the event that an ag conversion fee is triggered as a result of the earlier agricultural use of the property. The motion before you is to approve and authorize the city entering into that indemnification agreement.
Thank you. Comments? Alderperson Johnson.
I have a question. Are we selling this land or giving this land?
Well, we are selling it, although the agreement between the city and NAFA does effectively provide for the use of TIF funding to offset the purchase price.
Further comments regarding Resolution 41 of 2017? There's been a motion and a second. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no?
No.
That motion carries. Resolution 42 of 2017 also comes from Finance. Alderperson Lawrence.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move approval of Resolution 42 to assign the NAFA Development Agreement, and that's it.
There's a motion by Lawrence. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by O'Connor. Alderperson Lawrence.
And Alderperson. Attorney Dragney, please.
Okay. And maybe before I go any further, we should recognize a couple of NAFA representatives who are here tonight and who are available to answer questions. Could I ask you guys to introduce yourselves?
I'm Michael Mangar. I'm the CEO of NAFA.
I'm Brett Johnson, the facility manager in Stoughton.
Great, thank you.
So the current purchase and development agreement between the city and NAFA is, on the NAFA side of that transaction, is an entity called North American Fur Auctions US, Inc., which is a subsidiary of other entities, working your way up to kind of the parent corporation, I think if I'll get this right, North American Fur Producers, Inc., which is a Canadian company, as I understand it. In any event, that's the party that we're currently contracting with. The development agreement says that that NAFA may assign the agreement to another entity, but only with the city's consent. It also says the city's consent may not be unreasonably withheld. NAFA has, as a result of business structure and tax-related considerations, has requested that the city approve an assignment of the purchase and development agreement from North American Fur Auctions U.S. Inc. to a new limited liability company they would create called NAFA Properties Stoughton LLC. They have also proposed, and the assignment agreement that was included in your packet includes a guarantee from North American Fur Auctions U.S. Inc. That's the entity that we're currently contracting with, such that even after this assignment takes place, NAFA, the company we're currently contracting with, will continue to guarantee all of the obligations under the agreement. So from the standpoint of the city's position, financial position in this transaction, this assignment will not have any adverse impact on the city's position. We'll have the same guarantees. Well, we'll have the guarantees from NAFA that we already have under the agreement. Those will continue, and then we'll have this new entity that we're also contracting with that will also be bound by the provisions of the contract. So that's their request. Again, under the agreement, our approval cannot be unreasonably withheld. So if we're not going to approve this assignment, we'd need to have a reasonable basis for that decision.
Alderperson Johnson.
I just want something cleared up. I spoke before the meeting to Tammy, our financial advisor, and asked her questions about the land, and that if NAFA does go under and does close, the headquarters, that they're not obligated to pay back anything. Right?
Actually, Regina was the one who mentioned that. No, I said, that's not what I said.
I didn't know. I was saying what she was saying.
I was saying that it would go back to the parent company, NAFA, if the LLC went out of business.
Right. And so do we have, so if something happens, does NAFA have to then pay back? If it goes back to the...
So if NAFA Properties Stoughton LLC, this limited liability company, if it fails to meet its contractual obligations, North American Fur Auctions U.S. Inc., which is the party we're currently contracting with, will be a guarantor on those obligations and would be contractually obligated to meet them.
Okay, even if they go under too?
Well, if they go under two, they'd be contractually obligated to meet them, but if they have no assets, then it's an unsecured obligation, if that's your question.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Further comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no?
No.
That motion carries. Engelberger and Johnson voting no. Michael, did you vote no on Resolution 41 as well?
Yes.
Thank you, I missed that
I
one.
want you to note that I abstain from all of these.
Okay, thank you. I missed that too.
Next, 43. Oh, we got to vote?
Okay, I'm sorry. Resolution 43 of 2017 also comes from our Finance Committee. Alderperson Lawrence.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move approval of Resolution 43 to extend the deadline to close. And Pat, if you want to just explain.
Yeah, very briefly,
Let's get a second on that motion
Oh, I'm
first.
sorry. Second.
There's a motion by Lawrence, second by O'Connor. Thank you.
So the deadline to close this transaction under the current agreement is April 10. We don't believe that we'll be able to quite make that deadline in light of some of the work that's still being done to get ready to close this transaction. So the request is to extend the deadline to close to May 12. At the Finance Committee meeting, NAFA made it clear that it's their desire to close as quickly as possible. I think the city is on the same page with that. We'd like to close as quickly as we can, but it looks like we're going to need some additional time.
Thank you. Comments or questions? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no?
No.
No.
No with Johnson and Engelberger as well. And an abstention by Alderperson Kittleson. Resolution 44 of 2017 comes from Finance as well.
Well, I believe, Your Honor, that we should move to table this, because we took no action on this at Finance. So I move to table Resolution 44.
Second.
Second by Johnson? Was that, Hirsch, I'm sorry, I'd heard it coming from that way. And a motion to table is not debatable. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. So thank you for letting us jump around just a little bit. Thank you very much, folks, and now you can,
Thank you. I'd like to thank you guys too. It's an honor for us to build in the city of Stoughton. We're happy to be here, so thank you.
thank you. I'm sure Attorney Dragney will be in touch.
Yes, indeed.
Another guest here this evening is Joe Murray from Springstead, who's here to help us walk through some of our financial borrowing obligations, as well as our new finance director, Tammy Laborde. So Resolution 40 of 2017, I'm going to old business agenda item number 5, comes from our Finance Committee. Alderperson Lawrence.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, I move approval of Resolution 40 to approve the amended 2017 Borrowing Equipment Replacement Fund, Capital Outlay Fund, Building Maintenance Fund, and Technology Fund.
There's a motion by Alderperson Lawrence. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderperson O'Connor. Alderperson Lawrence.
And I'll ask Tammy to take it from here.
Thank you, Mr. Alderman. Everyone should have received in their packet, first of all, the resolution, as well as a detailed spreadsheet and a memo from me explaining some of the revisions that are being presented. When this information came to you last year as part of the budget process, since then we have gotten some updated information as to pricing for street construction projects. Some of them have increased and some of them have decreased. We also have revised pricing for various equipment, and the Parks Emerald Ash Borer amount has stayed the same, as well as the stormwater funding that you had approved. There was a slight error of $10,000 that has been revised. This is all on page 1 of the Excel spreadsheet under capital improvements. And you had also added additional funding to cover the fire engine purchase and TIF 6 road, I believe it was extension.
Yep.
Or street extension. On the list that's attached for you, lately there's been some interest in land purchases, and so as part of the borrowing, we wanted to include those items for your consideration. There are 3 highway trailer building, the carpet warehouse, and Nordic Ridge Park. Nordic Ridge Park is something new. So I don't know if somebody else can explain that one. Each one of those at $150,000. Then we have 2 properties that I've named Property A and Property B because we have not publicly discussed them for a total of $275,000. The increase from what was originally proposed to where we are now is about $1.2 million. The total borrowing would be recommended at $7,547,937. And Joe Murray from Springstead is here this evening to help educate us on what that effect would be to debt service.
That's what your discussion's about.
That's good. Okay. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Joe Murray from Springstead, proud to be the city's financial advisor. As many of you will recall, and there are several new faces here, so if I speak over something that you have questions on, I'd be happy to try to answer them. This is only the first step in talking about it. Your decision this evening is really to decide on the borrowing amount. But if you recall, I came before a committee in September when you were reviewing your capital improvement plan, and we laid out a model for your borrowing plans, not only for 2017, but 18, 19, 20, and 21. We have continued to move forward with the modeling on that, but as Ms. Laborde mentioned, your project amounts have changed a little bit from where we were. All the numbers that I present to you are always fluid based on the project amounts as well as the markets, et cetera, at the timing. But we have been modeling and moving forward. The plan that was approved by the council back in the fall when you adopted your capital improvement plan was to move the 2018 capital improvement projects that you plan to borrow for, move those forward so that we could try to maintain some bank qualification on the borrowing this year and hopefully next year in 2018. So that is why you've got a larger borrowing amount for this year than usual. That does include the capital improvement plan for 17 and 18. In 18, the plan is that we'll be coming back with the plan to borrow for the public works yard, roughly $8 million or $8.1 million at that time. The increase in borrowing amount has a general increase, and I'll have better numbers once you tell me the final amount after this evening. We project that the total borrowing cost for the capital improvement portion that's supported by debt service tax levy will increase from roughly $6.2 million to roughly $7.35 million. So that's an increase for the project amounts as well as the debt service. The total impact we're projecting will go from roughly, per $100,000 of equalized value, from roughly $620 up to roughly $735, give or take. So that is the cost or the impact, if you will, of increasing the borrowing amounts that we're moving forward. Once you decide on the borrowing amounts, hopefully this evening I will be coming back before you at your next board council meeting with a set sale resolution with having more defined schedules, and I'll have a better idea as to how we'll be structuring this. These project amounts have been moving and on the fly pretty quickly over the last couple of weeks. And that's why I wanted to come back and get better direction as to the amount so that we can pull together the necessary resolutions and move forward with the sale at your meeting in May. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Comments or questions from our alderpersons? Okay, seeing none. Sure, Council President Swadley.
Sure. Thank you, Your Honor. We talked about this a little bit at the finance, but I guess I'm looking for a quick overview of the money for Nordic Ridge.
Sure. I'm going to let Parks and Rec Chair Hirsch talk a little bit about that.
Thanks. I was just finding the original sheet. The developer at Nordic Ridge has, as with any development, has to set aside, money for parkland. In this park that they have, they're proposing not only a soccer field, but walking and bike trails throughout it, a new facility that would include bathrooms and ability to have concession stand. It'd be all be ADA approved, hopefully green development. They would also have the parking, the grading, a retention pond, or not even a retention pond, that's going back in, but the laterals going in. The developer has offered, and as well as a splash pad, the developer has offered, because he wants this to be a showcase park, and to add something new to the parks that we don't have already in Stoughton, that all this added up, I think he gives us $242,000 just for the what he is owed because of the development. And all the trails, the splash pad, the shelter, everything else added up to, I think, 550, something around there. But because he really wants this to be a showcase park, he's willing to actually add in $108,000 more to this park to get all these amenities. And what's left is that 150. And so in parks, and Dennis, if you can remember anything else, and Matt, we just thought it was a great partnership for the city to go into with the developer, that he's actually willing to put in more money. So, you guys have anything?
Alderperson Kittleson, anything you'd
No,
like
I
to
would agree
add?
with everything that Alderperson Hirsch said, that we'd been asking a fair amount of time for to get information back from the developer. And the other meeting that we had the other night, they basically presented everything that we had kind of been asking for, and they had kind of given a little bit more by forwarding all the money up front to us, with the stipulation that we would pay the 150 to finish it up. So I think that was a good idea on the Parks and Rec part, that we thought it was a good idea for the city to move forward with that.
Thank you. Alderperson Majewski.
Sounds like a good idea. Couple questions though. Shouldn't the $150,000 that's necessary be coming out of the Park Development Fund? And why is it under land purchases?
I'm going to let Tammy speak to that.
Park Development Fund currently has funds that are designated or reserved for land and improvements. Trying to determine what exactly that means, because it's not just one project, it's a number of projects that money has been set aside for. As of right now, though, the only fund balance that would be available for anything is about $25,000.
So how is it a land purchase?
How is it a land purchase?
This isn't.
Right, I mean,
On your memo, it says land purchases.
at the point that this was being presented, I'm just trying to capture that in there. It would be park, then.
It would be a capital improvement project.
Right, then that's what it would be, yes.
Mislabeled it. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. Further,
I
Dennis.
just
Yes,
wanted to
Dennis
defend.
Kittleson. How about Alderperson Kittleson?
I just wanted to defend the finance director. When all of this was brought to us, we were trying to get numbers for everything, but we didn't have any numbers. So in order to keep all of this scheduled on track the best that we could, that's when we had made the motion to bring it here and then talk to our new finance director, because we obviously lost our other one. So they were kind of, I felt bad because, kind of get thrown under the bus, but, so that's kind of where that went. So we're trying to look for help.
Absolutely. Further comments or questions regarding the Resolution 40? Sure. Council President Swedley.
Thank you. So basically, you just put the money in there as a placeholder, is what you did?
Exactly. I was aware of these, at least the several other items, and then Mayor Olson had brought this one to my attention, so I incorporated that into the list and misidentified it as land because I wasn't quite certain.
Okay, that's understandable. And as you said, there's no additional money in the park funds in order to pay for it. So this would be the only option. And if we were to decide that we didn't want to do it, then the developer would pull their $108,000 off the table. Is that how I understand this?
Pretty much. I mean, that wasn't discussed, that was actually what was going on. It was an agreement kind of together that would be going on. I mean, if we pull it, some things just wouldn't be built, obviously.
Okay.
As we talked about it at Parks and Rec, if I may, this is another one of those great public-private partnerships that allow us as Stoughton to do so many of the great things. They're willing to put in more money if we can put in some money to make this park come to fruition sooner than later. I think it's a win-win for everybody.
And I just also want to add, the developer's going to do most of the work, so they got a better price than if we would contract it out. So that's why it was a little bit more reduced too. So it was a bigger partnership than just the money.
Thank you.
Yep. Any additional comments? Alderperson Engelberger.
Thank you, Your Honor. These are all through the CIP, is that what it is, capital improvements?
I'm sorry, what was that, sir?
These are all through the capital improvements?
The land is not through the capital improvements. That one item would be moved there. But if you look on page 1 of the packet, the building section takes into account the the Public Works Facility design and land purchase. The equipment is the fire engine and any other capital items that you've previously approved, and it's detailed further down in the pages. Parks Emerald Ash Borer, the street reconstruction projects, stormwater, and fire engine and TIF. Those are all things that you had all pretty much previously approved, except for, of course, updated pricing and updated information on contracts that had been let. So the bids came back.
Why is the Emerald Ash Borer under parks as opposed to streets?
I don't know. That's how somebody had it labeled. So that's why I put Emerald Ash
Is that
Borer next
accurate,
to it.
or, I'm just wondering.
Not really. It's a street. Brett, it's
Okay.
really a street. It's a public
take
works
parks out then.
Are these the trees in our parks, or what?
Oh, we do that too. Public works, yeah.
So I'm wondering.
It's public works.
It's definitely a public works function. parks and streets are under that umbrella. We have roughly 318 trees in our right-of-way, which is our terrace area, and another 411 in our parks. So it's a public works function.
Thank you for the clarification. Okay, further comment? Yes, Tammy?
Just one last thing. Brett has been very helpful in all of the updated information. I know that when he started, a lot of the 2018 items hadn't been researched or checked out yet, and so he was able to get some really good pricing on some of those.
All right. Seeing none, this is one that I would like to vote for. I would like to vote with roll call.
Hirsch.
Aye.
Gittleson.
Aye.
Swadley.
Aye.
Boersma.
Aye.
Johnson.
No.
Lawrence.
Aye.
Mieski. Aye. Engelberger.
Aye.
Jensen.
Aye.
Truul.
Aye.
O'Connor.
Aye.
Bartlett.
Aye.
Motion carries on a vote of 11 to 1.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Joe, for coming down to help us out. And Joe will be back in 2 weeks.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I know that the hour is late, but I would entertain maybe a 5-minute break.
I'll second that.
2 minutes.
Two? We only get 2 minutes? All right, 5-minute break. We'll be back at 9:30. All right, welcome back. So I guess I'm looking for your guidance. Do you want to go back under presentations and have Matt's presentation at this point, his update regarding historic preservation ordinance, before we continue with our agenda?
Might as well put
That's
it back
my
online.
assumption. Yep.
Sure.
All right,
Okay.
Attorney Dragney.
Okay, great. All right. So first, I'm glad Peggy is still here. Peggy, I want to apologize to you and to Landmarks Commission for not having you on my letter as one of the groups that my memo is being distributed to. That was certainly no intent, not my intent to not have you on the distribution list. This process and my engagement in it has at times felt a little kind of hectic, I guess I would say. I would, as the process unfolded, I don't think I actually was in a position to meet with the Landmarks Commission before submitting my memo. As I recall, I received the commission's work. Then I was asked to review it, and I did, and I submitted my memo, and certainly would be more than happy to meet with the Landmarks Commission and to work with the Landmarks Commission or anyone else that the city would like me to work with on this project. And at the last council meeting, it was my sense that that was the direction the council wanted me to go. It was a little unclear to me exactly what my marching orders are. And so I actually suggested to the mayor that I be given the opportunity to just have some discussion with the council about kind of where we are and where you want to go, where you want me to go. Perhaps I can get some direction about the scope of what you want us to do, what you want me to do, and maybe even provide some preliminary direction on some of the larger policy issues. I really didn't know how to approach this exactly. So what I decided to do is put together this presentation tonight that will share with you my understanding of kind of where the city is today with its regulatory framework, what I understand some of the issues to be that I've noticed as I've kind of been brought into this process, and then some examples of some of the bigger and smaller issues that I've seen, and then my hope is that the council can give me some marching orders that I can work with going forward. Let me turn this thing on now. I apologize to Alderperson Mieski for the what's going to happen here. Okay. Holy cow, why does it look like that?
Just maybe if, when you go into the presentation mode, it'll change.
Let me see if I can get the hub guy here.
The expert.
Yeah, what the, oh, that's all different weird letters.
It's not supposed to have all those like funky letters and everything that makes it impossible to see what the text is.
There's half for the Russian.
You read my mind. Oops. Looks like Russian. Wow.
It's like calculus.
Looks like lawyer language to me.
This is the problem. I can't read anything.
The other sides are
Well,
okay.
yeah, but those are just PDFs. It's my text that's the problem. Go down to my text. How does it look down there? Yeah. That's not working.
All right. Should we try a different computer?
Yeah, why don't you guys head on with the rest of your agenda? We're going to try and find a computer that's going to work.
Talk amongst yourselves, yep. All right, so we'll move to the consent agenda, agenda item number 4. Our
Move to
consent.
approve the consent agenda.
All right, there's a motion by Lawrence, second by Truul. Would any alderperson wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. We've already addressed old business, number 5, resolution 40. An update on agenda items 6 and 7. As I stated in an email, these were put on here as sort of placeholders. In case we had heard some updates, we have not heard an update yet, so motion to table.
Move to table.
Thank you. Remove, is that what you said?
That would be for both
6 and 7.
6 and 7.
6 and 7.
Ooh, that's good.
So that's a new word, remove to table. Alderperson Truul, the second by Alderperson Lawrence. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. We've addressed agenda number 8. Takes us to new business. Ordinance 4 of 2017 comes from our Planning Commission for a first reading this evening. Alderperson Truul.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Plan Commission brings forth an ordinance amending the zoning classification of a portion of a parcel at 3201 Macomb Road. See proposed CSM Lot 1 attached in the city of Stoughton from RH Rural Holding to I Institutional. And this is a first reading. It'll come back to us in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Resolution 29 of 2017 also comes from our Planning Commission. Alderperson Truul.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Plan Commission brings forth Resolution 29-2017, approving an extraterritorial jurisdictional land division request by Tom Matson for property located at and adjacent to 3213 County Highway A in the town of Rutland, and the Plan Commission recommends approval. And I so move.
Second.
So motion by Truul, second by Engelberger. Comments or questions? Alderperson Truul.
This is just a slight modification in some boundaries of some lots for this property, so nothing dramatic.
Thank you. Without any comments, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries.
We're ready when you are.
Okay. Well, we're just on a roll, so let's keep going a little bit longer. Resolution 30 of 2017 also comes for a Planning Commission. Alderperson Truul.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Plan Commission brings forth Resolution 30-2017, approving an extraterritorial jurisdictional land division request by Jason Perry for property located at 1928 Williams Drive in the town of Pleasant Springs, and I would move approval.
Second.
Motion by Truul, second by Jensen. Alderperson Truul.
Once again, this is a slight modification in property. In this case, we also, what's happening is a property is having a portion of the property broke off for a residential lot and part of it for ag. Normally, our guideline is, or the recommendation is for the residential lot to not be more than 2.5 acres. In this case, the lot actually is, the residential lot is 5.2 acres. But again, Plan Commission approved, and I would encourage you to support this.
Thank you. Questions or comments regarding Resolution 30? Okay, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. I think we'll stop here. There may be discussion on Resolution 31. So, Attorney Dragney.
Okay, so I want to, this slide illustrates what, excuse me, this slide illustrates the different categories I've been able to identify that are potentially relevant to this discussion. So under Chapter 38 of the city's ordinances entitled Historic Preservation, there are several categories that can be in play. One is a landmark, another is a landmark site, and the third category is a historic district. Now, it's my understanding from discussions with the planning department staff that there are, at present, there are no historic districts currently existing within the city, at least within the meaning of Chapter 38. In other words, no, there are historic districts in a different sense, but none that have been created under Chapter 38, to the best of my knowledge, after discussions with the planning department staff. So those are the categories that I see as currently potentially in play under Chapter 38. Then we have, under Chapter 78, the zoning code, we have what's called the Downtown Design Overlay District. And then there's also a federal law called the National Historic Preservation Act. And as I understand it, and I confess I'm not an expert in this area, but to the best of my knowledge, there are potentially listed buildings, in other words, individual buildings that are listed on the National Register, listed sites, and listed districts. And then, according to your planning department staff, working with Michael, he tells me that within listed districts, there can be properties that are themselves perhaps not individually listed on the National Register, but are identified as contributing to a listed district. And again, I may have some more to learn about those classifications, but that's my understanding as of this point in the process, that we have Chapter 38 and Chapter 78, which are local zone, city regulations, and then we have this national legislation. This map illustrates the Downtown Design Overlay District. As I understand it, that is that's certainly been designated from a zoning standpoint as in the Downtown Design Overlay District under Chapter 78, your zoning code. It is not a historic district under Chapter 38. As I understand it, there are none. That may well be a historic district listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Whoops. This next slide is intended to illustrate, I asked the planning staff to send me, I said, please help me understand what exists today in terms of historic districts, designated landmarks, so on. This is a list of city designated landmarks, at least according to the planning department.
And just for clarification, I'm pretty sure you're working with Michael, who
Yes.
is also staff to the Landmarks Commission.
Yes.
So he,
And it's a one-page document. All of the city designated landmarks show up on this page. Unfortunately, for some reason, I don't think they're all showing up on that screen. There are a few more at the bottom of the page. You can see as well that some of these landmark sites are also located in districts that are identified in the, there's a key down here in the lower left-hand column that also identifies other historic districts. And as I understand it from talking to Michael, for example, the Main Street Historic District, that's a National Register of Historic Places district, not a locally designated district. And as I understand it from talking to Michael, that's true of the Main Street, the East Side, the Southwest, the Northwest, the National Register of Historic Places. I'm not sure what that's intended to reflect. Some of these, frankly, some of these categories, I'm not entirely certain what they mean, but What I have been told is that this is the list of city-designated landmarks. Then we get into properties that are listed on the National Register. And this goes on for pages. And so this is the Northwest Historic District. And you'll see there's a property address, and then there's a column for local landmark, which I think the intent is if it's been locally designated, that would say that. And then there's a column that says contributing. And as I understand it, that's this question of whether the property is deemed to be contributing to a historic district. And again, I'm not entirely sure what that means, but it's a classification that apparently is out there. So these are the Northwest Historic District, and then we've got the Northwest District Continued. By the way, you can't even see the whole page here. It goes on further than you can see. Northwest Continued, there's another 2 pages. Let me see, how can I? So you can see there are hundreds of properties that are included in what I understand to be the Northwest Historic District listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Then we've got the Southwest Historic District. And again, there are, I think, hundreds of properties that are included within the Southwest Historic District. Then we've got the East Side Historic District. Again, hundreds of well, I don't know. Do we have over 100?
83.
Maybe 83 on the east side. And then we've got what this refers to as the East Park Historic District. Okay. So those are the different categories that I've been able to obtain information on. So what's regulated with respect to these different properties? Under Chapter 38, which is the landmarks chapter, sites that have been designated as landmarks are regulated with respect to alterations or reconstruction that affects the exterior, and they're also regulated with respect to demolition. When it comes to historic districts, I believe your current ordinance is unclear with respect to what activities are or are not subject to regulation under Chapter 38. Under Chapter 78, the zoning code, if you're a property in the downtown design overlay district, changes in appearance such as painting or other exterior changes are subject to regulation. Also, physical modifications of the structure, including demolition, is subject to regulation under Chapter 78. If you are simply in a district that's listed on the National Register, or if you're a property that is listed on the National Register, as I understand it, there are no regulatory impacts that flow from that. There is a requirement that prior to demolition, the Historical Society be given notice. When the City Council gave direction to the Landmarks Commission to make a change to the ordinance, this is my understanding of what the direction was. It was to require Common Council approval of demolition of structures that are listed on the National Register. And so that's my understanding of the direction that was given at the meeting in January, I guess. The current procedures for addressing those changes. So under Chapter 38, if someone wants to do something to a local landmark that is regulated, such as change to the exterior appearance of the building, under Chapter 38, you're required to obtain a certificate of appropriateness from the Landmarks Commission. If you're in a historic district, again, to me, the language of the ordinance is unclear regarding what approval procedures, if any, would apply to something you want to do to a property that is simply in a historic district and not subject to some other regulatory process. If you wish to demolish a structure that is a designated landmark under Chapter 38, the ordinance says that Landmarks Commission approval is required, but as the ordinance is currently drafted, approval is not possible. There is no way for the Landmarks Commission to approve demolition of a landmark under Chapter 38. So that's the Chapter 38 process. Under Chapter 78, again, again, the Downtown Design Overlay Zoning District. If it is a landmark structure, a locally designated landmark, then what Chapter 78 says is that the Landmarks Commission makes a recommendation to the Plan Commission makes a final decision. If it is not a landmark structure, then the Plan Commission makes the final decision. Again, if you're listed on the National Register, and that's the only thing you're not subject to one of these other provisions, then there's a requirement to give notice to the State Historic Society before demolition. No other current regulatory approval process. Again, as I understand the direction from the council in January, there was a request to Landmarks Commission to propose an amendment to the ordinance that would require common council approval to demolish a building listed on the National Register. So that would be a change from the current process. The other thing I want to talk about with this slide is that one of the things that I think is challenging for us, given the current regulatory framework, is the fact that we do have kind of overlapping regulatory processes here that can come into play, where you could have multiple processes that apply to a single project. For example, you could have a structure that is, let's use demolition because we've been talking about that lately. A structure that's been designated as a landmark, proposed for demolition, and located in the Downtown Design Overlay District. One concern we have under the current ordinances is uncertainty about what process applies. Is it the Chapter 38 process, or is it the Chapter 78 process, or is it both? I don't honestly know what the right answer is. It's not clear. Without better direction, I guess the best conclusion I could come to is to say it looks like both procedures apply. That's a bit of an odd place to land here, though, because as I said, under Chapter 38, the way that ordinance is currently drafted, it's impossible to get approval to demolish a building that's a landmark. It's just not allowed under Chapter 38 currently, as I understand the ordinance. And so you could have a situation where someone goes to the Landmarks Commission and the end result is no, and it has to be no, and then you can go to the Plan Commission and you could potentially get a yes, but that's kind of a meaningless yes. So that kind of overlapping jurisdiction and uncertainty can occur under other circumstances as well. I just provided that as an example of one place where I see that. And then, of course, if we amend the ordinances to apply some additional procedural requirements to properties that are not subject to Chapter 38, not subject to Chapter 78, but are listed on the National Register, that could create some questions about well, let's say you are listed on the National Register and you're listed on these other places, then what's the procedure? And so we have to be careful not to create kind of real uncertainty there. So here's some of the issues that I've identified, and just a rough cut at some ideas about maybe how you might proceed. So overlapping and inconsistent procedures in Chapter 38 and 78, I just talked about that. How might you address that? Well, one possibility is that you repeal Section 78-913. That's your zoning process. You get rid of the Design Overlay Zoning District category in your zoning code, and you manage this simply through Chapter 38. And you say, we're going to use the Chapter 38 process and deal with designated landmarks and historic districts and landmark sites, and these are going to be Landmarks Commission decisions, and we're not going to have a parallel Plan Commission track to address the same issues on the same properties. Or, but now there might be some disadvantages to doing that as well, which would need to be taken into consideration, because you might find that you're going to miss something if you do that you're currently getting out of your Chapter 78 process. You could remove landmarks from the review under Chapter 78. Try and segregate these things so that you don't have overlapping jurisdiction. It's either one or the other, and it's not both. You could retain what you have, although then you have continuing either both uncertainty and kind of overlapping jurisdiction. There may well be other options that I haven't thought of. Honestly, I haven't spent a ton of time trying to figure out how I would solve that particular problem. It's certainly something I've seen as I've looked at the ordinances, and it's something that the city could choose to address if it wishes to. What should be done with the council request to give council authority over demolition of structures listed on the National Register? Is that still something the council wants to do? If so, how should that be done? And should that be done within the existing structure, or should that be done in a way that fits into some modified structure? As I noted earlier, Section 38-37 currently makes it impossible to demolish any landmark. I'm not sure if that's really what was intended. That's the effect of that section right now. Is that something you want to revisit? Do you want to look at that? Want to leave it the way it is? What should be done with the current moratorium? Should the city kind of detangle the highway trailer building from this ordinance review process? Here's the language of the moratorium that was adopted. No further applications or requests for demolition of any structure within any existing city-designated historic district, and I guess I've been told there aren't any of those. Any historic district listed on the National Register, well, as you've seen, you've got a number of those, and quite a few properties included in those districts. The Downtown Design Overlay District, or a currently city-designated landmark or structure listed on the National Register of Historic Places be processed. And then we've got that the demolition of the highway trailer building not proceed until the city council has considered possible changes to demolition-related ordinances and lifted this temporary moratorium. So that's what was adopted at the last meeting. One of the things that I think we have to recognize about the process of modifying these ordinances is we don't know exactly where it's going to go, where it's going to end up, and how long it's going to take. And so if you're concerned about having, for example, that highway trailer building in limbo while we're trying to figure out what to do with your regulations and what, if any, changes to make to those regulations, if you're concerned about that, you might want to consider detangling those two things, saying, well, let's treat the highway trailer building in a different way rather than make it wait for these ordinances to be kind of addressed and modified, but that, you know, that, or maybe not. Maybe you say no, we want to wait. So to me, I guess if you want me to meet with the Landmarks Commission and sit down and work with them, I'm happy to do that. But I think it would be very helpful, I know it would be helpful to me, and I think also probably the Landmarks Commission, to have a little more direction from the council on the scope of what you want us to do. Do you want us to work on that first item, which is, should we take a look at the big picture and the fact that we have like these overlapping and potentially inconsistent procedures in these two chapters and try and find a way to kind of make that problem go away? If so, do you have any thoughts about how you'd like to do that? What would you like? Do you want us to stay with this request that we give council authority over demolition of structures listed on the National Register? Is that still a direction you want to go? And by the way, I mean, as we work through these things, I may well and others may well identify other. There is another example I can give you because I know it exists. In Chapter 78 right now, the ordinance describing the procedure for project review approval. In one place it says that the procedure for project review approval is the same as the procedure for approving the conditional use permit. In another place it says that the Plan Commission is the final decision maker. Those two statements are inconsistent because the conditional use permit gives the City Council the final decision, not the Plan Commission. That's an example of an existing kind of inconsistency built into the zoning code. We can fix that if you want. We can identify other issues if you want a detailed kind of analysis of where those kinds of problems exist, and if you want to try and solve those problems. I mean, we can do that as part of this process. So again, I'm happy to do what you'd like me to do and work with the Landmarks Commission or others, but it would be helpful to have some direction.
Thank you. Alderperson Engelberger.
Thank you, Your Honor. A couple things. I would like to see if we could ask our Landmarks Chair to just have a little bit of input in what you just presented us, Matt. You know, you weren't certain about certain things. I think Peggy she does know about some of these things, and I think even in her testimony earlier, I think she's got a list of things that basically answer a lot of the questions you had in your letter.
Yeah, but just to comment on that, so as I listened to that, and you know, I heard her perspective on things, and then I thought, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I think there's more to the story that we need to talk through.
Yep. So I guess I'd like to hear a little bit from her, and I think on the one particular thing, 3837 was regarding, what was
Demolition?
it? Can you speak on that, Peggy? It sounded like you weren't correct on the 3837, but...
Making it impossible to demolish a landmark?
Yeah. Is that the case or no?
Not exactly. So, our ordinance was quite old. You know, it was written, I think when we looked at it, it was like almost 20 years old. And so there were a lot of errors in the ordinance, and there, like I had explained earlier, you know, best practice evolves over time. And so we wanted to correct sort of the most glaring errors. We did not correct everything because there was the feeling that if we could correct the most pressing errors, then we'd have a document that we could work with, and then we could sort of move forward to, you know, sort of finish cleaning it up. So one of the things that we actually worked on was the language about demolition. And the way it had been worded was that, you know, if an owner comes in and wants to demolish a local landmark, you know, we enter a period of negotiation with that owner, and we try to find a new use or a new owner or another solution to demolition. And at the end of that negotiation period, if we really hadn't come up with anything, the way the ordinance was written was that the commission was to just direct the
Building inspector?
Thank you. The building inspector to
Issue a permit.
No, to issue a permit.
It says not issue a permit.
Well, in the original ordinance, it was that they were to issue a demolition permit, and that was it.
Right. Now it says you can't issue.
So that's what we changed. We thought, this really isn't appropriate. If someone wants to demolish a local landmark, this is a decision that, you know, it's really not our authority to say it's okay to demolish a local landmark. You know, we'd say, no, we're not going to approve your demolition permit, and then everyone has recourse. So there's an appeal, it's essentially an appeal process. And so if someone is not happy with our decision and still wants to demolish their local landmark, there is an appeal, and that is to go to city council. And so city council is...
Is that in 38?
I don't...
Yes.
Yes, it is.
I don't remember seeing it. I'm not saying it's not there, but I just don't remember
It's
seeing it.
Which number is
C.
it? 38 what?
3837C.
Okay.
So council has says the final authority to approve that demolition.
Okay.
And what would happen is that, you know, the applicant would come in and sort of make their case, and the Landmarks Commission would say, you know, why they made the decision they did, and, you know, council would have to make that final decision.
Can I just...
Guideline
go
for,
ahead,
let me
go
just,
ahead. Yeah,
just
go ahead.
one, the guideline that we follow for when something can be removed from being a local landmark is that has the building lost the qualities for which it was eligible? If the building has lost the qualities for which it is eligible, then an argument can be made that it no longer meets the criteria. I mean, we nominate landmarks based on criteria. And so if it no longer meets that criteria, you know, you can make the argument that it no longer is eligible and should not be a landmark. So, and then there are sort of extreme instances of that where, you know, let's say there's a catastrophic fire and there's no building left, or there's just a shell of a building left. Well, you could argue that it no longer retains the characteristics that made it eligible for a local landmark designation. Now, I agree that those items are lacking in terms of being defined in the ordinance.
The standard, like,
Yes.
that's missing, and
Yes.
that's what I want to say. The concern I have is that there's no standard that says, here's how the Landmarks Commission decides whether to approve demolition or not. Instead, it seems to say, well, you're going to work with them, and if they can't find a way to save it, then you tell the building inspector to deny it. And then from a legal standpoint, I look at that and I say, well, if there's an appeal to the city council, they're supposed to ask, did you make a mistake?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how can they say you made a mistake if you did exactly what the ordinance says, which is, we tried to find a way to save the building, we couldn't do it, so we told the building inspector not to issue a permit. City council, what are you supposed to do? So it's, we need, that's a place where there's a standard. There needs to be a standard, and yeah, it's, I read it, and my conclusion was, I don't see a way that you can approve demolishing a building here. Even if it comes to the city council and you were to approve it, on what basis would you approve it? If the Landmarks Commission did their job correctly, is the concern that I have. It's nobody's fault that we have this kind of problem. It's because this is frankly hard stuff.
So if I can just continue. The really important point in all of this is that we found out through this process, we're talking about something that came up in planning about a building that's in the National Historic Register, and found this out because we started going through the process. It's the first time it's ever happened in this city. It's the first of that kind. We've had other demolitions, but not like this. That's the reason for Planning Commission making a motion in January to send it to the attorney. And what they said was table it for the Dregney to review this request for compliance with the ordinance. And so that was the start of this process, to make sure that the ordinance is in compliance. It's also gone to this body 3 times. We've had 3 motions on this, that basically the same thing, to get it resolved and get the ordinance in compliance, and then make your decision based on whatever comes out of the process. And you know, everybody talks about the process taking so long in committees. That's the reason last time that I did send a letter or an email to everybody here asking for a committee of the whole. It wasn't so the committee of the whole, or so this body could legislate and take power away from committees. My intent with that was to have the landmarks included in that meeting, the Planning Commission included in that meeting, the council included in that meeting, and any other body, maybe the RDA, included for input, so we can expedite the process of getting our ordinance in compliance. And the reason that is so important, in my opinion, is what's happened since then. Even though we've made those 3 motions here at the council, and the motion was made at the Planning Commission to do this, there has been, the Plan Commission has continued to defy the direction that this body has asked for. Now, I'd like Matt to maybe make me understand how that can be. Maybe there's a reason for it, but here's my problem. If the planning commission acts the way that the ordinance currently reads, that's not in compliance,
Well, when you say the ordinance is not in compliance, I don't know what you mean.
you just told us it's not in compliance.
No, I
It's
didn't say it's not,
conflicting.
I didn't say it's out of compliance. I said.
Okay, it's in conflicting,
and
it
so-
should have been my word, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and so what that means is that has resulted in difficult challenges in construing the ordinance to see what it means. So, for example, the Plan Commission asked me, what is the procedure that we need to follow to process this application? I rendered an opinion that said, well, I need to reconcile two different conflicting provisions of your ordinance to come to a conclusion, and I did that, and I said, in my opinion, the conditional use permit procedure applies unless there is a more specific provision in section 78.913. And so what that means here is that the conditional use permit procedure applies, except that the Plan Commission makes the final decision, because it says that in about 3 places in that section. So I said, that's the procedure under the current ordinance, in my opinion. Now, the other thing I'll mention is that with respect to the application that's pending for the Main Street property, there is a provision in state law that says that if someone applies for a permit of that sort, they're entitled to have that permit processed under the laws that are in effect as of the time they filed their permit. So it's not possible to subject that application to rules that are different than the rules that were in effect when that applicant submitted the application. So I think the Plan Commission's job is to process that application and make a decision on it based on existing ordinances. They don't really have a choice.
So let me, if I could just continue, it's going to take me just a second here.
Sure.
It's getting late. So I guess I'm going to ask this question, and I'm going to read this because I kind of prepared it just so I wouldn't, so I said what I wanted to say, basically. So what damages will the city be assessed if sued and found to be in violation of its own conflicting ordinance regarding project review and conditional use? Because one of those says the Plan Commission has final say, the other says Plan Commission defers to the council for the final say. So if a building is allowed to be demolished under the current conflicting ordinances, once a historic building is gone, it's never coming back. It's lost forever. What price will this city pay to account for this type of loss? I would say the damages a court may impose could be a staggering amount of money, not to mention the loss to the community of another part of the historic nature of the city. We need to do better than this for the people who will call Stoughton home 20, 50, and 100 years from now. So I'm asking the Plan Commission and any other city entity to follow the procedure set out by the motions that we've made and not consider any demolitions of historic buildings until the ordinance is in compliance or considered and determined to be non-conflicting. Once the ordinances are adopted as non-conflicting, then the city should follow those ordinances. And if demolition is adopted at that point, so be it. But just what I said, we're setting ourselves up to be sued, in my opinion. So I would ask the Plan Commission to let the process play out, get the ordinance in compliance, and then let's deal with it. That's what I'm asking.
So my response would be, the Plan Commission has an obligation to process the application before it based on existing ordinances. That's clear under state law. If the Plan Commission doesn't do that, one potential, the kind of claim that could arise from this situation is not a damages claim. It's called a certiorari review claim. And what it means is either the applicant or someone else could take the position that the City Plan Commission, for example, has failed to act properly in acting on the application. So, If the Plan Commission, for example, refuses to process the application and act on it based on existing ordinances, the city is subject to certiorari review, and a court would not assess damages, but would look and say, was that the right thing for the Plan Commission to do? And if the court said, no, that's not the right thing to do, the court would then send it back to the Plan Commission and order the Plan Commission to process the application and make a decision. If the Plan Commission, on the other hand, proceeds with processing the application and, let's say, approves it, and somebody in the city believes that that was the wrong thing to do, that, in fact, the Plan Commission is acting improperly given the moratorium that the City Council has adopted, then somebody could attempt to, again, seek certiorari review of that decision and ask a court to order to stop the process from moving forward any further. Now, that would be difficult because they'd have to show that they have standing to assert that claim. But if they could show that they're standing, and if they were a neighboring property owner, they might. You know, if there was somebody downtown who owns property downtown, they might be able to show that they have standing. But it wouldn't be a damage claim. It would be what's called a certiorari review claim, where someone goes to a judge and says, Judge, this City Plan Commission is not following the law. Order them to follow the law. The last thing I'd say, if you look at that moratorium, the way it was structured was intentionally, as I understand it, it says, no further applications or requests for demolition may proceed. And my understanding of the reason it says no further was there was an intent to not go back and capture pending or existing applications. That was my understanding of why it said no further applications and not no applications, period, including existing applications.
Well, the two previous motions don't say that, but they say that it needs to be a decision made by the Common Council based on appropriate and lawful standards. To me, that ordinance is not appropriate, and I think if we just do it, I think they're subject to a lawsuit. You don't bring an 1884 building back. Once it's gone, it's gone. So, you know, that's the reason I asked for this to be expedited throughout the committee process, so we don't have to wait for 3 or 6 months for this to happen. I don't think it's too much to ask for, and you know, that's up to this. Up to whatever we do, I guess.
So I've got a couple of questions. Michael, I think you're talking about the building on East Main Street, is that correct?
Yep, 315.
Okay, so what I heard, Peggy, I need you to say that for me again. What I heard you say, or what I thought I heard you say, was if the building is no longer in, I'm paraphrasing because I want you to repeat your exact words though. If the building is no longer in condition that it is a landmark.
38 doesn't apply.
So you're talking about if something is no longer eligible.
If it's been dilapidated, it's no longer in its, in
So
a state that can.
condition does not equal integrity. So integrity is having original materials, exterior materials, interior plan, decorative features. Those materials, the presence of historic materials demonstrates that it has historic integrity. The integrity of those historic materials is intact. It doesn't have anything to do with condition. Those materials could be in horrible condition.
Okay.
But the fact that they're there from maybe its date of construction is integrity. Condition is just they need repair. Because you can always repair historic features and materials. So there's a distinction that to be listed in the National Register or to be a local landmark, it's not about condition. It's just about, is there historic material there? Does it have integrity? And when I was talking about the criteria for evaluating if a building no longer retains the qualities which made it eligible in the first place, you'd have to go back and look at, how was that building evaluated for eligibility? And then, based on how it was nominated, then you look at it and say, well, does it retain those qualities for which it was listed? And if the answer is no, then they can make an argument that it's no longer eligible. It doesn't retain those qualities for which it was listed.
So maybe because it's late, I'll be bold with this question. So the building on East Main is in the downtown overlay district. So do we know what qualities?
Your Honor, I'm sorry, but I'm wondering if we're not veering off the.
I just want to ask that one question, then I'll come
That's
back
fine.
in, because,
I just think
well,
the whole
Peggy's here as our,
conversation is kind of veered a
yep,
little
she's
bit.
here as our expert tonight, though, and that's the discussion we're having.
I understand that. Go
So
ahead.
if you,
But if I might, you got to remember, this question of what to do with this building is not before the city council.
That's right.
that's true.
The question of what to do with this building is before the plan commission.
I heard Alderperson Engelberger ask that the Plan
It's also
Commission
not
not
on
take
our
any
agenda.
further action.
Right.
What is before us tonight is your review of 78-905 and 78-913, which you state it's not possible for the CUP procedures to be applied in their entirety without conflicting with the clear language given in the commission, given the Plan Commission final project review authority.
And that doesn't mean there's anything illegal about applying the ordinances as written. They have to be applied. What it means is that because of how they're written, it results in a difficult interpretation problem for city staff and for me, frankly, to give you all advice and the Plan Commission advice about how to apply them. We still have an obligation to apply the ordinances, even if they're difficult to apply, even if they're internally inconsistent. We can't say, oh, we found out that there's something inconsistent, so we're just going to say we're not going to apply the ordinances. We're not going to follow the process.
We're saying
gonna,
fix the ordinances. That's
we can do
exactly what
that.
this, since January, we've been trying to do this. And,
Okay,
you know.
I'm going to interrupt, though, to Paul's point. What our Attorney Dragney is looking for is focus and direction. If I may paraphrase you, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, I can go meet with the Landmarks Commission and we can start working on this. And we can try and figure out what do we think the problems are, what kinds of solutions are out there, what kinds of recommendations should be brought back to, and I don't know if you want them to go to Plan Commission first so they have some input before they come here, and we can do that. And I can go broad, say, let's look at everything, make sure we get everything fixed, or, and I'd be happy to do that. Or if you all say, no, we don't want you to do that. We don't want to spend the money on that. We don't want to spend the time on that. Just do this one thing over here, you know. So I'm happy to approach this however you'd like. The reason I gave you this presentation was so that you could see that it's not, right now I don't have direction. So with no other direction, my default would be, I'd sit down with the Landmarks Commission and I would say, I think this is wide open. Let's look at everything. Because I don't know what else to look at. I wouldn't just pick one thing and look at that. I'd say, without more direction for the council, let's look at everything.
The direction's
Thank
been
you.
made by two motions, Your Honor.
We have an alderperson, we do have an alderperson over here. Alderperson Lawrence would like to
Thank you,
speak.
Your Honor. Well, I guess my question to Matt is that, based, Matt, on the on the agenda, what it says here, are we, is the council, it just says a review, so this is kind of just a report. So does that preclude us from taking action on this tonight or not?
Well, I think it's allowable within the scope of this agenda item for you to give me some direction on how you'd like to proceed with this project.
Okay.
I don't think it would be appropriate for you to make a final decision on, amending the ordinance tonight. That's not before you. But with respect to how do you want me to proceed, how do you want the Landmarks Commission to proceed, if you want to give direction on that, you could. Or you could say, look, let's not do that tonight. Let's come back and talk about that again at our next meeting.
I think that's fine, but I guess my comment to that is that it's not entirely clear on the agenda that that's what our options are either, so.
Yeah, well, and I apologize for that. We didn't know exactly what the heck to do here. Honestly, I was hoping to get some direction. If you don't want to do that tonight, that's fine, and you can talk about direction at another meeting.
Alderperson Hirsch and then Johnson.
Thank you. I think I'd like to give you some direction. I think I'd like to make a motion that Attorney Dregney work efficiently with the Landmarks Commission to especially address the inconsistency in the ordinances that have to do with Chapter 38, the historical preservation, and Chapter 78 to begin with, and to report back to a committee of the whole within like 3 weeks, if that gives you enough time.
It doesn't, because I'm going to be out of the country for about half of that period over the next, I'm going to, from like April 7th to April 17th. So for me, I wouldn't be able to get together with these guys probably until after I get back from that trip.
So when would be?
I could meet with them late April.
So maybe by our first weekend, or first meeting in May, or have a city, call a council of the whole meeting within early to mid-May, based on their, what they've resolved. I mean, if you get it all done.
Why don't we see if you get a second, and then I have a question for clarification.
Second.
Okay, there's a second by Alderman Mayeski. The motion was, if Regina, if you'd like to repeat it, or we can have Lana repeat it to be sure that we've got it.
My motion is to direct Attorney Dregney to meet with Landmarks as soon as possible to go over the ordinances that deal with Chapter 38 and 78 to get them consistent, and then convene into a committee of the whole so we can review them as collective by mid-May.
Right, motion by Hirsch, second by Mayeski. Attorney Dragney, you had a question?
You have Alderperson Swally can
sorry.
go
Everyone
first.
over here first.
Somebody else can go
Okay,
first.
that doesn't matter to me.
ahead.
Alderperson Johnson.
I already thought we had what we wanted worked on from before being on Landmarks, where we wanted to do the inconsistencies of the 78 and 36, and that it was going to go, Landmarks was going to have an opinion, but then the city council was going to have the final say. I thought that's what we had come up with from working on Landmarks.
Right, thank you. Alderperson Swedley.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I guess my first question, Matt, is do we need both chapters? I mean, to
Not
me,
necess-
less might be more here.
So, not necessarily. Let me just give you an anecdote. Another community I work with kind of faced a similar problem. They chose to just use the zoning code only, and to use a design overlay process. They retained their Historic Preservation Commission, which serves in an advisory capacity to their Plan Commission on these decisions. And then if a structure is going to be protected, it has to be protected through the zoning process. Now, you could do it the other way. You could say, let's not use the Plan Commission or the zoning code. Let's use the historic, the landmarks designation process. Now, there are different processes. So the procedure by which a property is included in the overlay district is a zoning procedure. Plan Commission makes a recommendation, City Council approves it, it's done. Procedure by which a landmark designation happens is Landmarks Commission makes a recommendation to the City Council approves it. So you could say, let's go with one and not both. So,
Well, my preference is to go with the Chapter 38 and then have the council have final say on the demolition, which leads me to my other question. Where does the RDA fall into this? Are they under is that a separate one yet, or does that fall under one of the two?
So as I understand it, if the RDA, you're asking where the RDA would fit in as a property owner wanting to demolish a building?
Yeah.
They would need to obtain whatever approval any other property owner would need to obtain if the building they want to demolish is subject to one of these regulations. As I understand it, the highway trailer building, to the best of my knowledge, is not currently subject to one of these regulations. It could be down the road, but it isn't today. So it's to my knowledge, maybe you would know better, it's not a city designated landmark. It's not in a design overlay district. So those are the only two ways that a building right now, under your existing regulations, would be subject to this kind of a review process.
Right, for that one, if we were to change the ordinance and include the National Historic List, then potentially would it fall in that?
I don't know if that's even on the National Register, I'm not sure.
No?
And to me, that's one of the reasons my suggestion is that you think about detangling the highway trailer building from this process, because I don't see how this process of addressing your ordinances is going to answer the other question, which is, what do the city council and the RDA want to do about that highway trailer
So
building?
that building is not on any historic list any way, shape, or form? is
Not
what
to
you're
my
saying?
knowledge.
Okay, it's just an old building as far as designation is concerned.
It is not a local landmark, and it is not listed in the National Register. To my knowledge, it hasn't been evaluated for either of those designations. So that's not to say that it might be eligible, it just hasn't been evaluated. So, the research on the building, its history, is it eligible?
Mm-hmm.
And so that evaluation hasn't been done either for designating it as a local landmark or for the National Register of Historic Places.
Can I ask a question, Peggy? What's easier? Going through the process to evaluate a building for designation as a landmark and getting that done, or adopting a zoning ordinance that puts it in a design overlay district? I know what I think the answer is. The zoning one. You can do that just like that. So again, that ties into what kind of process do you want?
Alderperson Lawrence.
Class 2 notice at a public hearing at the Plan Commission, City Council decision. Now it's in a design overlay district and it's subject to project review, if that's the direction you want to go. But again, I'm not sure that's the right answer for the highway trailer building. I mean, the other way there are other ways that the council and the RDA might choose to approach that building.
Right. It sounds like folks need to noodle on it a little bit longer.
Well,
Alderperson Lawrence. Not tonight. I wasn't inferring that we needed to stay here till tomorrow morning.
All due respect, I think these questions that have just been asked are exactly the point of the motion.
So from the motion as presented, what I would take from that motion is I would go to Landmarks Commission, and I would, and this is not going to be fast. I hate to say it.
Well, it's not really giving you any direction. It's just saying, go to there and talk about all this stuff.
Right,
And
so
what
what
I
I
was
would-
trying to do is be a little more specific in what I wanted you to do. Now, I don't know if that helps.
Well, here's the thing. You can either try and be more specific tonight, or if you're not, what I would do with Landmarks Commission is I would say, I think we should come back with a menu of options for the city council. We should say, here's 2 different ways to resolve the conflicts. Here's a way that really works with Chapter 38 and not 78. Here's a way that works with 78. Here's a way that kind of uses them both.
And I'm okay with that, and the reason I didn't want to call a committee of the whole yet is because I know how difficult it is to get things done in a large group. So I would just soon have a smaller group work on it first and answer as many of the questions ahead of time that the larger group may have. So when we get together, it creates a more efficient process.
That's what my motion was.
I was going to say, let's pull it back to the motion. We have a motion on the floor, and Lana's going to read
Well,
it
I'm
for
going
us.
to support the motion because of that.
Okay, let's vote.
I got a question.
Yes, please read the motion. Oh, I'm sorry. Alderperson Engelberg.
Thank you. You know, this is the same, it's not the same motion. The motion we adopted on January 1st and February 14th by 10 to 2 and 11 to 1 margins basically are doing more than what this motion is suggesting.
Oh, we're going backwards.
Yeah,
But-
just exactly what Tass pointed out.
I'm not sure what those motions were.
Landmarks development ordinance for consideration by the council that would amend existing city ordinances such that no building in a historic district listed on the National Historic Register of Historic Places may be demolished without review and recommendation by Landmarks Commission and a decision by the Common Council based on appropriate and lawful standards. I mean, that's started in January 24th. Actually, it started on January 9th with the Planning Commission. Now it's March 28th. This building is up for the 3rd time. The building that spurred all of this discussion, is up for the third time for demolition on April 10th, prior to any meeting that we're going to have after this meeting.
So just, again, nothing that we do in this ordinance process is going to change the legal rules that apply to that building.
I think there's some legal ramifications here, so
Well,
that's my opinion.
And then, so with respect to the motion from Alderperson Hirsch, as I understand it, the motion was to work with the Landmarks Commission to address the internal kind of conflict or inconsistencies between chapters 38 and 78.
Well, no, I mean, it's,
That was what I thought you said, but I'll step back and listen to the motion.
well, it was looking at 30, it's just like before, look at 38, look at 78, and if there's a conflict, you know, just what you had said, you wanted to present the different options, exactly what.
And I'd be happy to do that. Just so you know, though, I mean, it's not a quick process. When I did that process with another community, I met with their Historic Preservation Commission at least 6 times before we took a recommendation to the governing body.
What kind of direction did they give you?
The governing body?
Yeah.
That process was initiated not by the governing body, but by the village administrator and the Historic Preservation Commission. They decided to start the process, and so the governing body didn't give the initial direction.
The reason I say that is, what I hear, and others argue if you like, is that the city council wants to have final say on demolition of historic buildings. So that would be direction that I would want to give you as you meet.
So let me ask you this question. You mean all of the hundreds of properties listed on the National Register? Do you really want that? Every time there's a garage or something, do you want that to come to the city council? There are hundreds of buildings listed on the National Register.
Sure, because
If that's what you want, we can do that. I just want to make sure.
That's what I'm hearing.
Okay.
like I asked Director Shields in the last meeting, how many demolitions do we get in a given year? And his answer was
I don't know.
very few.
Yeah.
So, hundreds of them, they're not all coming at the same time. I don't see a problem with it.
So if that's the only thing you want us to do, you know, we can just do a standalone thing and take demolition out of 78 and 38 as they exist today and say, or I'm not sure about that. We might still want to leave them in there. I don't know. But if that's the only thing you want us to do is make sure that properties that are listed on the National Register, that demolition has to be approved by the city council, and you don't want us to address the other issues that we've talked about tonight, fine, that can be my focus.
Okay, we currently have a motion on the floor, though, and
Well,
I know
we're still
Alder,
discussing it, and I'm not quite done. And
I know, but Alderperson Jensen has his hand up.
Well,
so we're gonna
I
let him-
still had the floor, and I
Well,
want
not
to
yet
continue the
floor, but
point.
I won't debate that.
The point is by doing it that way, what it does, it not only gives you clear direction, but I think it honors the wishes of the council, and it also lets the Landmarks Commission, the Planning Commission, and the RDA all know what's going to happen. So if they're going to run into a situation where this is going to come in play, it puts them in a position to want to communicate with the council and say, hey, here's what we're considering. You know, where are you guys at on this thing before they go through all the gyrations of sending out an RFP and getting somebody that they want to hire to be a master developer on a project, only for us to say, no, we're going to put a moratorium on it because we don't want a building removed. So, you know, when something happens in the community, and they're going to come to us. They're going to come to the city council and say, why did you let this happen? And the way it stands right now, we don't have the authority to look them in the eye and say, because I felt it was important to do this, or I felt it was important not to do this. All we have to do is say, well, it wasn't my decision, so I'm washing my hands of it. Well, that's not how I want to serve. You know, I want to be in a position where if something's going on, people know who to go to, and we can be responsible and held accountable for our vote. And I think that's what people expect from their local representatives.
All right,
So let's make sure we know what the motion is, because I'm hearing two different things. I'm
Before we
hearing
vote on
one
the
thing from
motion, though, we
Alder Hirsch.
still have folks that would like to talk,
Okay, and
as Council President Swadley did.
Yep.
Thank you.
Alderperson Jensen,
Thank you.
and Mieski.
Thank you. And just to add to that, the only direction I would say is that you mentioned standards before.
You're going to have them.
Absolutely, that would be
Wish I would.
paramount.
And-
You have to have the standards so you have so they have something to go by.
Well,
So that they don't have to say no to something if it's obviously needs to come down.
Well, we're also talking about something that will ultimately come to the city council if we go with this.
We'd have to have standards.
And there's going to have to be a standard that would apply to the council decisions, so, yep, there have to be.
Okay, so that said, the motion that's here, I think, is redundant to like Mike was already saying there. I think it's redundant to that. I don't think we need to even have that motion. I think all we're looking for is just direction to the attorney and to Landmarks, and so I'm not going to support the motion.
From Alderperson Hirsch?
Mieski.
Call the question.
Okay. This is Alderperson Hirsch's motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Would you please read the motion?
Motion that I have says, it's a motion by Alderperson Hirsch to direct the attorney directing to work with the Landmarks Commission to review Chapter 38 and Chapter 78 of the city ordinances and report to a committee of the whole with the findings in May of 2017. With a second by Mieski.
All right, we'll vote by roll call.
Kittleson.
Abstain.
Swadley.
Aye.
Boersma.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lawrence.
Aye.
Mieski.
Aye.
Engelberger.
Aye.
Jensen.
No.
Truul.
Aye.
O'Connor.
No.
Bartlett.
Aye.
Hirsch.
Aye.
Motion carries a vote of 9-2 with 1 abstention.
All right, thank you. So let's move back to our agenda. Agenda item 12, R31 of 2017. This item comes from our Planning Commission. Alderperson Truul.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Plan Commission brings forth Resolution 31-2017, resolution by the Common Council and the city and the City of Stoughton approving site park condominium. Plan Commission recommends approval, and I would so move.
Second.
Motion by Truul, second by Jensen. Alderperson Truul.
What this is, we have worked over the last, about a year ago, I think we changed some ordinances that deal with zero lot line duplex-type buildings going forward, that they are required to have separate sewer and water lines run into them. What it takes away, the long-term intent is to take away duplexes that were built or that are going to be built in the future that would just have one set of sewer and water lines running in that would later on try and separate. And so this has been an issue that has come up previously, and we've looked at different places that are out there. This request that's before us is one of those cases. It's an existing duplex that has a one water line, one sewer line that comes into it. And so in order to allow them to separate it and have two owners, they needed to create a condominium. So that's the intent. Long-term, again, we're trying to do what we can to clean these things up so they don't happen in the future, but that's why this request came before us and why the majority of the Plan Commission supported it.
Correct, thank you. Alderperson Engelberger.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to explain why I voted against that, and basically, in a nutshell, it's because they're trying to use the zoning ordinance to not comply with what should be happening here. It's a way to skirt the current zoning and not have to put an extra lateral in. So that's basically what it is in a nutshell. So I'm going to vote no.
Further comments or questions? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no?
No. No.
Let's vote by roll.
Bartlett.
No.
Hirsch.
No.
Kittleson.
Aye.
Swadley.
No.
Boersma.
No.
Johnson.
No.
Lawrence.
Aye.
Mieski.
No.
Engelberger.
No.
Jensen.
Aye.
Truul.
Aye.
O'Connor.
Aye.
The motion failed on a vote of 5-7.
Resolution 32 of 2017 also comes from our Plan Commission. Alderperson Truul.
Plan Commission brings forth Resolution 32-2017, a resolution by the City of Stoughton Common Council approving a certified survey map to combine properties located at 753 and 761 Nottingham Road, and I would move approval.
Second.
Motion by Truul, second by Engelberger. Alderperson Truul.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is a combining of two lots to allow for a larger single-family home than would be allowed on one of these lots to be constructed. So that was the reason why the owner had to buy both lots and combine them. So
Thank you.
please support.
Comments or questions? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Resolution 33 of 2017 comes from our Planning Commission. Alderperson Truul.
Thank you, Your Honor. Plan Commission brings forth Resolution 33-2017 by the City of Stoughton Common Council approving a certified survey map to split the property located at 3201 Macomb Road, and I would move approval.
Second.
Motion by Plan Commission, motion by Truul, second by Engelberger. Alderperson Truul.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is the property that the city is looking to develop the West Side substation on. And what this does is this carves out the parcel of the land that's necessary for the substation and leaves the balance of the property.
Thank you. Comments or questions? Alderperson Hirsch.
I'm just thinking, what would go next to the substation?
Potentially residential.
So you would actually put residential
Could be
next to-
commercial. I mean, we don't know. It'll be for sale.
I guess I have a
Developed, I
problem
guess.
putting any residential next to a substation with the possibility of.
It may not. It may not.
Well, I'm
It's
just saying,
still- yeah.
as a community, knowing what's out there now, what the data that people living next to substations have a higher risk of cancer, leukemia, and other problems, why would we even do that?
Yeah, that's up for Alderperson Truul.
Yeah, and again, there wasn't necessarily a plan that was brought. It was the utilities that came to us and carved out the lot, the amount of property they actually need for the substation. So there wasn't really anything specifically talked about beyond that.
But if the vision is to surround the substation with residential or commercial, I mean, I think we need to really seriously think about where the substation is going to be located to make sure it's not going to harm our citizens or future citizens.
Alderperson Truul.
Again, as I actually said at the meeting, given the fact that it is serving the west side and serves some of the commercial, I would have preferred it to have been part of a commercial development. Having said that, we own this property, and the commission took a fair amount of time and actually dealt with it over 2 meetings to try and figure out how we set the substation as far back on the property, adjacent woods, and we spent a significant amount of time talking about landscaping and the like. It will be as far back, as said, off 138 as we can. And again, the utilities were basically coming to us asking us for what property they actually need for this. So I would encourage your support. And to Regina's question, if and when someone brings forth a proposal on how we might use the other property, then we can address that use.
Thank you. Alderperson Johnson.
Johnson?
Johnson.
Okay, thank you.
Johnson.
I'm going to vote no on this. I was at the Planning Commission where they were discussing landscaping, and it's not making our neighbor sisters or neighbor cities, too happy where it's going. And before I became a council member, I was at a meeting when the gentleman down there from Utilities had said that we're going to need a substation earlier than later if Walmart goes in. And I think everybody in the public and here knows how I feel about Walmart. So I say put it over on their parking lot. Thank you.
All right. We'll vote by roll.
Right.
I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
It's okay.
Council President Swadley.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I watched the Planning Commission meeting on TV, so I know you guys really worked hard to come up with what you did. I appreciate that. So this property, was it zoned institutional, or what's it zoned as?
Yeah, but it's institutional.
So is this property identified any way in the comprehensive plan?
Yes.
What was the, don't recall.
Right now, I
what-
believe it's on the map as institutional.
Institutional.
Okay, so that just basically just leaves the door wide open. Is that kind of the idea, is to allow that flexibility, or that's just how it is, so we just left it?
Well, I don't believe residential was really considered
Right.
for the site. It's really more of a commercial area of the community as it goes forward. I think that's what was meant by, it could be retail, but it could also be a business. It could be,
Flip side of it is, I can't speak for the utility, and that was who was bringing this before us, but it was to create, again, a certified map to identify the property that would specifically need to be used for the substation.
Thank you.
all right, without further questions, and I'm not seeing any hands, we'll vote by roll.
Hirsch.
No.
Kittleson.
Yes.
Swadley.
Aye.
Boersma.
Aye.
Johnson.
No.
Lawrence.
Aye.
Mieski.
Aye.
Engelberger.
Aye.
Jensen.
Aye.
Truul.
Aye.
O'Connor.
Aye.
Bartlett.
Aye.
That motion carries on a vote of 10 to 2.
All right, thank you. Resolution 34 of 2017 comes from our Finance Committee. Alderperson Lawrence.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move approval of Resolution 34, 2007, authorizing and directing proper city officials to make a payment of $8,000 to the Stoughton Fair Association to provide a fireworks display for the Stoughton 4th of July celebration.
Second.
Motion by Lawrence, second by Swadley. Alderperson Lawrence.
I think I just
You kinda said it,
pretty much all
right?
of it, but if you want to expand, or Sid wants to expand.
Sure. Alderperson
Yeah,
Boersma.
I don't think that, I'm going to support this. I don't think that our public funds should be going to the fireworks display. When I was a kid in our town, collections were taken for 4th of July celebrations. It worked out well, and I don't think we should be using public funds for this particular situation. I'll be voting no.
Thank you. Alderperson Swadley.
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, this came to both committees that I'm on. And I think actually Dennis kind of brought it to our attention. And basically what the Fair Board did is they went out and came up with a proposal that provided them their fireworks for their traditional last night of the fair showing, and the city as well, a second show at a discounted rate with more fireworks than we've had in the past. One of the things that we talked about last year was looking for ways to support the fair. I think this is one way of doing that, and also for the community. I had a lot of people after last year come up to me and say, "What? There's no fireworks on the 4th of July. What happened?" And I explained that it was cut in previous budgets, and for a few years we were able to find some local businesses to sponsor the fireworks. But for whatever reason, last year we were unable to secure the money to do that. I believe the money would potentially come out of the contingency fund to pay for the fireworks. I know there's been a number of positions that we budgeted for in the city that have either not been filled or weren't filled as quickly as we had hoped. So I'm pretty confident that there's going to be money left over at the end of the year. So I'm going to support this. I'm hoping that at budget time we can come up with a way to continue to have fireworks and to support the fair going forward.
Further comments? We'll vote by roll call.
Kittleson.
Yes.
Swadley.
Aye.
Boersma.
No.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lawrence.
Aye.
Mieski.
Aye.
Engelberger.
Aye.
Jensen.
Aye.
Truul.
Aye.
O'Connor.
No.
Bartlett.
Aye.
Hirsch.
Aye.
Motion carries on a vote of 10 to 2.
Resolution 37 of 2017 comes from our Public Works Committee. Alderperson Mieski.
Thank you, Your Honor. Public Works would like to present Resolution 37, authorizing and directing the proper city officials to enter into an agreement with Forest Landscaping and Construction, Inc. for the 2017 street and utility construction contract 1-2017. Approved by Public Works 4-0, and I so move.
Second.
Motion by Mieski, second by O'Connor. Alderperson Mieski.
This is a ballot, Director, he's been waiting a long time.
He has been waiting.
Essentially, this is the road construction contract with streets and utilities. This is a standard contract we've used Forest Landscaping in the past, actually last year, and they are were the lowest bidder, and they were the lowest responsible bidder. So there's really nothing more to say about that, unless there's any questions about the contract or the
Thank you. Council President Swedley.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to support this. I know there was a few issues last year, not with the quality of the work. I think everybody was happy with that, but there were some communication issues with some of the neighborhoods when the roads were being shut down, and I'm just wondering if there's a mechanism in place to try to help avoid that this year.
Sure. I think we'll address that in our pre-con meeting and make sure that happens and make sure that they follow through on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further comments?
Yeah.
Alderperson Kittleson.
This is a group that was in here last year, correct?
One of them, yes.
One of them. Okay, so are we going to do whatever we can with this here to make sure we didn't have, they were parking on people's property and over the top of other stuff, and so we'll make sure all of that isn't going to happen again?
Yep, we'll address all that in our pre-con meeting and then follow through throughout the construction season to make sure that doesn't happen.
Thank you. Alderperson Boersma.
Once again, at Public Works, I didn't have an opportunity to really address these issues, so I will be abstaining.
Thank you. Further comments? We'll vote by roll call.
Swadley.
Aye.
Boersma.
Abstain.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lawrence.
Aye.
Mieski.
Aye.
Engelberger.
Aye.
Jensen.
Aye.
Troll. O'Connor.
Aye.
Bartlett. Hirsch.
Aye.
Kittleson.
Aye.
Motion carries on a vote of 11-0 with one abstention.
Thank you. Resolution 38 of 2017 also comes from our Public Works Committee. Alderman Mieski.
Thank you, Your Honor. Public Works would bring forth R38, 2017 for your cogitation, debate, and approval. Authorizing and directing the proper city officials to enter into an agreement with crack filling services for the 2017 bid for crack filling projects. This was approved 4-0, with Mayor voting yes, and I so move.
Motion by Mieski, second by Engelberger. Comments or discussion? Alderperson Swadley.
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't recall bidding this out in the past. Is this something new we're doing, or am I just mistaking it, or did we rename it, or?
This is a standard bid for road maintenance for crack filling services, and also probably in the past you may have saw slag sealing. We're going to do the crack filling portion of that. So essentially we're crack sealing or crack filling over 80 roads in the community.
80 roads?
Yep, so this is a big contract, and we feel that that's the best way to preserve our roadways and extend the life of them.
How many roads do we have?
We have over 57 lane miles of roadway.
We have 12.
So how that works is we take the PACER rating. PACER ratings are a road rating mechanism, 0 to 10, 10 being the better roads, the new roads. And essentially we take the 6 or above and do crack sealing on those because that's the best bang for our buck to prolong the life of the road. So.
Thank you.
Okay, well, Alderperson Engelberger.
Thank you, Your Honor. So this, Brett, this is a hired contractor that's going to do this, or we're doing the work?
This is a hired contractor. We don't have the equipment or the staff to.
I thought we've done this in the past, haven't we?
I can't answer that. I don't know. We don't have the equipment to do this currently.
Do you want the equipment to do this?
No.
We essentially we don't have the staff to do it, and no, I think we get from a fiscal standpoint we're better off hiring it out.
Okay.
We'll vote by roll call.
Boersma.
Abstain.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lawrence.
Aye.
Mieski.
Aye.
Engelberger.
Aye.
Jensen.
Aye.
Truul.
Aye.
O'Connor.
Aye. Catnip.
Bartlett.
Aye.
Hirsch.
Aye.
Hiddleston.
Aye.
Swadley.
Aye.
That vote carries on 11-0 with one abstention. Sorry.
All right, Resolution 39 of 2017 comes from our Public Works Committee. Alderperson Mieski.
Thank you, Your Honor. Public Works brings forth Resolution 39, 2017 for your viewing pleasure and approval. Authorizing and directing the proper city officials to enter into an agreement with Olson Tunes Landscaping. Public Works Committee recommends 4-0 with mayor voting yes, and I so move.
Motion by Alderman Mieski, second by O'Connor. Alderperson Mieski.
This is a contract for planting of street trees.
Director Abear, anything you'd like to share?
Essentially, we ordered over 300 trees this year, a combination of emerald ash borer, tree replacements, construction area, replantings, then also for new development.
Alderperson Truul.
My only question is, did we use Olson Tune last year? I mean, I guess I'm surprised we only had one bid.
Yep, we did use them last year, and we did solicit for 4 bids from area reputable planters, and we only got 1 bid. And essentially, it was the same pricing we received last year, so we're pretty confident that it is good pricing.
Okay, with no further comments, we'll vote by roll.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lawrence.
Aye.
Mieski.
Aye.
Engelberger.
Aye.
Jensen.
Aye.
Truul.
Aye.
O'Connor.
Aye.
Bartlett.
Aye.
Hirsch.
Aye.
Hiddleston.
Aye.
Swadley.
Aye.
Boersma.
Abstain.
Motion carries on a vote of 11-0 with one abstention.
Thank you. All right, agenda item number 19. Would entertain a motion and I guess someone to read to vote to go into closed session. Alderperson Lawrence, would you like to do us
Sure.
the honors?
Your Honor, I move that the council convenes in closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85, Parent 1, Parent E, to consider the acquisition of property for a public works facility, bless you, Stoughton, Wisconsin, and may return in open session to take action on matters discussed in the closed session.
And is there a second?
Second.
Second by Truul. We'll vote by roll.
Lawrence.
Aye.
Mieski.
Aye.
Engelberger. Jensen.
Aye.
Truul.
Aye.
O'Connor.
Aye.
Bartlett.
Aye.
Hirsch.
Aye.
Hiddleston.
Aye.
Swadley.
Aye.
Boersma.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
We're back into open session, addressing Resolution 45 of 2017. We discussed this at Finance, so I guess I'll start there. Alderperson Lawrence.
Oh, okay, thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, I move approval of Resolution 45, 2017, that is the resolution of necessity relating to the acquisition of land needed for a new public works facility.
Motion by Lawrence. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by O'Connor. We'll conversation. Yeah. Want to talk a little more? Questions, communications? Otherwise, we'll vote by roll call.
I got a question.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Alderperson Engelberger.
Where is the resolution?
It was emailed to you
It
separately.
was emailed.
It was a separate
when?
email, confidential email.
Yeah, emailed.
Okay.
I got a
Can you
question.
tell me when so I can look at it?
Was it Friday afternoon?
Friday afternoon.
Friday or so.
Okay.
After 4 o'clock.
While you're looking, Alderperson Johnson.
I don't know if I'm doing this right at this time or not. I would like to make a proposal to have this go to referendum, whether the citizens get to vote on whether they want to have this $8 million or $9 million building built.
Okay, this isn't what this resolution is regarding, though.
Okay, well, let me know how I can do that then. Thank you.
Okay.
I do have a
Alderperson
question.
Kittleson, yes.
You said this one out, is this the one that Kelly Kurzma would have sent out, or did you send it?
No.
I
this-
sent it. Tammy sent it.
You sent it.
I sent it.
Okay, I don't think I got it, because I had got an email from Lana, and I went in Friday, I think, and talked to her, or was it Monday?
No, Lana wasn't here last week.
Monday, that I had never received any information from the city until I got an email from Donna and Kathleen, where one had popped up, and then I had
Okay.
noticed that our agenda, but,
I wonder if
so
there's
anyway, I
something
got it
with your
here.
address, because, yeah, you're listed on the council, so,
But it never came through.
okay. We'll have to check on
Let's look into
that.
that.
But I got one from Lana on Monday.
Okay, that is odd.
You want to read it?
I'm looking at it.
It sent you East Main Street address.
What?
Maybe it sent you East Main Street address.
Ooh, sassy, it is late.
It is 3/4.
Person Borsman.
Could I hear the motion? again?
Well, the motion,
right here.
sure, I'll let Lana repeat the,
The motion?
yes, please.
Motion by Lawrence to approve Resolution R 45, 2017, the resolution of necessity relating to the acquisition of land needed for a new public works facility, with a second by O'Connor.
Okay, and then I have a
Sure,
follow-up.
Person Borsman.
I disagree with spending $8 to $9 million on this public works facility, and I don't think I could ever support this. And
That's not what
so I
we're
will be
voting
voting no
on.
on this.
Okay.
We're not voting on that. With
Right.
all due respect, we're not voting on that.
I don't like,
tying your
point.
I'm
We're
not
not
voting,
voting on that.
I'm not voting on the resolution either.
Okay, thank you.
I'm voting against the resolution.
I understand that, but we're not voting on $8 million
Okay,
also.
we've already voted on the $8 million.
Yes.
I understand that totally. And for
And I
that
don't understand your point.
reason, I'm just saying, I'm backing up what I have been voting on this thing for a long, long time, and I'm not going to vote on
Okay,
I'm not going to go vote positively on this resolution.
all right, thank you. Further questions on Resolution 45? We'll vote by roll call.
Mieski,
Aye.
Engelberger,
Aye.
Jensen,
Aye.
Truul,
Aye.
O'Connor,
Aye.
Bartlett,
No.
Hirsch,
Aye.
Kittleson,
No?
Swadley,
Aye.
Borsma,
No,
Johnson,
No.
Lawrence.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, motion by Lawrence, second by Mayeski. All those in favor, aye?
Aye. Good job.
No?
And that was.